into the planning and delivery of school infrastructure in New South Wales. This is our third hearing into this important issue. Before I commence, it's the custom of this Parliament to acknowledge the traditional inhabitants of this land, the Gadigal people of Aurora Nation, and I do that with all due respect, as well as acknowledging other important contributors to the history of this site, those who constructed the Parliament House building and the parliamentary staff over many decades who supported MPs and made our work and representative role possible. We acknowledge and thank them all. Today we will be hearing from a number of parents across the Greater Sydney and the Hunter regions, including parents from Gledswood Hills and Mcdowie public schools, as well as parents who serve on the P&C of Marsden Park Public, Wentworth Point Public and Randwick Boys and Girls High Schools. The committee will also hear from community organisation Future of Western Sydney University Milperra campus. While we have many witnesses with us in person, some will be appearing via video conference today. I thank everyone for making the time to give evidence to this important inquiry. So thank in the audience our representative from School Infrastructure New South Wales, who diligently comes along and provides good feedback and assistance to this inquiry so far. I rate Infrastructure New South Wales as the best part of the department. So the infrastructure schools, the best part of the department, and they've been very helpful so far. Before we commence, I'd like to make some brief comments about the procedures for today's hearing. We're being broadcast live on the Parliament's website. A transcript will be available on the committee website as soon as it becomes available. In accordance with the broadcasting guidelines, media representatives are reminded they must take responsibility for what they publish. While parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses giving evidence today, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of the hearing, so you need to be careful in that regard. Committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the protection of parliamentary privilege. This is not the Barilaro inquiry. All witnesses have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. Witnesses, if you can't answer a question, it's available to you to take it on notice, take more time to give a considered answer with reference to certain information, and those answers are due within 21 days. If witnesses wish to hand up documents, they can do so through the staff or by email if you're appearing on the WebEx. In terms of the audibility of the hearing today, I remind both committee members and witnesses to speak into the microphone and also turn off your phones. If you're on video conference in particular, it's helpful to the committee to identify who you are, as also it is for committee members to identify themselves in asking questions. For those with hearing difficulties who are present in the room today, we're fitted with induction loops compatible with hearing aid systems that have telecoil receivers. Our first set of witnesses are Hannah Braga and Kate Lanny, who come from the Gledswood Hills Public School, founders of the community support for that school, which is hopefully one day going to be a very important facility in the district, and we welcome them to the inquiry. And I could say to each of the witnesses, Hannah and Kate, if you could please state your name, position, title and swear either an oath or affirmation, and if you could do that in turn, starting with Hannah, please, online.
My name is Hannah Braga. I'm a parent at Gledswood Hills Public School. I'm the founder of the Community Support for Gregory Hills Public School Group, and I will do an affirmation.
And if you could just read the words of the affirmation, please, Hannah.
Oh, sorry, I don't have them. Where do I find them?
She's been emailed.
They were emailed. Hang on, we'll just find them for you.
Sorry.
If you can repeat after me.
Yeah. Oh, I've got it here.
You've got it here, great.
I've got it, sorry, my bad. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Laney and I'm a parent of children at Gledswood Hills Public School, and I'm a member of the Community Support for Gregory Hills Public School group, and I'll do an oath. I swear that the evidence about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Right, thank you very much. It's available to both of you to make an opening statement if you'd like, but be mindful the committee in our visitations, we visited the site of the Gregory Hills Public School. That's the one that's yet to be built, but it's at the planning and design stage, we were told. But we've also visited Gledswood Hills Public School and looked at the various problems there. So just so that the witnesses are aware of our prior knowledge as a committee, and also for the committee members, Hannah and Kate have submitted some documentation which is being circulated for us to have a look at. Hannah and or Kate, would you like to make an opening statement, please?
Sure. So pretty much the way that Kate and I got involved in this, we both... oh, sorry. Am I still on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hannah, okay. Loud and clear.
It disappeared, sorry. So Kate and I both met in the kindergarten orientation in 2020 for our children that were starting in 2021. Both of us had come from Oran Park Public School where there were 48 demountables, and we had moved over to Gledswood Hills Public School because a new school was in our area, and we saw the chaos that was happening at Oran Park, and we really didn't want that for our children. So when we turned up to the kindy orientation for our second children, and we found out that there were 200 plus kindy kids enrolled already for the following year, we were really concerned. And that made us start asking questions about what's happening with Gregory Hills, when is this school coming? There's obviously a need for it if we're having these huge numbers in the kindergarten groups. So pretty much we created the group Community Support for Gregory Hills Public School, and there was a huge push from the community. They all, like the majority of people we spoke to, wanted to know what was happening and when, because Gledswood Hills was obviously a much smaller site than Oran Park, and we didn't have the high school site that Oran Park had when our kids were there to play in. So we reached out to various members in Parliament, Peter Sidgrave, Sarah Mitchell, Gladys Berejiklian, Prue Carr, to try and get some answers, and they were not forthcoming with much information. We were often referred to the school infrastructure, which was giving us generic answers. We then ended up finding out that Gregory Hills Public School had been pushed back to 2027 opening date for a two-stage opening. So half the school opening in 2027 and the other half opening in 2030. And knowing that Gledswood Hills was already 200 above capacity after 1 year, we were obviously very, very concerned. A day after we found this out, and it did go onto the news, we did have Gladys Berejiklian and Sarah Mitchell come out to Gregory Hills and announce that it would be in the budget, so that it was going to be brought forward, but no further information. We asked them, what's happening, when will this school open, and more importantly for us right now, what's happening with Gledswood Hills? What is the plan for next year at Gledswood Hills? We've got another 250 kids starting again next year, and the year after, and the year after, and there was just no foresight whatsoever. So at the moment we've got an overcrowded Gledswood Hills Public School. It's about to become a construction site. And then we've got only, across Camden Valley Way, we've got Barramurra, which is only at 50% capacity as far as I'm aware. With a little bit of foresight in my mind, they could have redirected some of the Gregory Hills families over to Barramurra while they were building the extension at Gledswood Hills or building Gregory Hills. And I just feel like this area is completely neglected. Things aren't thought about, and it's affecting the kids, the teachers, the community, the roads, everything.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. Kate?
I would support everything that Hannah's said already. It's just further to that, I'm actually a resident of Gregory Hills, so I actually have been travelling from my suburb to Gledswood Hills, and I did exactly the same thing as Hannah has already said, but we have felt that this has been a topic that keeps being repeatedly announced that it will be going ahead, but there's no actual, up until we were able to secure some documents on the date through other members of Parliament, we had no date, there was no plan moving forward, and we just kept getting told that it was in the planning stages. Gregory Hill's first residents moved in 2012, and I myself purchased in 2015, in the middle of 2015, and moved in the middle of, at the end of 2016, when I was, had a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and my children are in year 3 and year 1 now, and I didn't think that when they had said that there was going to be a school in the area, that it would be not needed, and that we would actually have to fight for answers on why there was a site that was sitting there empty. And yeah, it's just really frustrating knowing that we've been at Oran Park, we've seen the excess number of kids. There was 14 kindergarten classes when our first children were in there in 2019. And the school had to separate break times for K-2 and 3 to 6 because there was not enough playground space, and they were borrowing the oval from the high school, which had not been built yet. And we wanted to move them closer to home and avoid those issues of the large numbers of people. And after the first year, we were in the same boat again, and we don't have the space on the site at Gledswood Hills because it is a steep site and terraced. There's not as much room as what there was at Oran Park. So, our concerns are, when is the Gregory Hill School going to be built, delivered, ready for opening, and what are they going to do in the meantime? Because at the moment we have 18 demountables on site at Gledswood Hills Public School, and there's not much room left for the kids to play. So, and they've also separated the break times at Gledswood Hills now after that first year. So as of 2021, they've separated the break times because there's not enough room for all the kids to be out at the same time.
Thank you. I might start the questioning to Hannah. I was surprised to hear that Burramurra is only at half capacity. Are families from Gregory Hills and Gledswood Hills allowed to go to Burramurra out of area?
No.
Really? So,
as far as, I haven't tried to enrol myself, but I've heard that it's very strict. You cannot go out of area.
So there's a school sitting half empty just across Camden Valley Way. I suppose these would be families that would just do the 10-minute car trip. You wouldn't let your kids walk across Camden Valley Way, I'd say. But you can't do it out of area. Well, just opening up that opportunity surely would ease a lot of the pressure that we see at Gledswood Hills. Okay.
Yeah. This is what I said to Sarah Mitchell when she came out. I said, what's the plan for next year? She came out halfway through last year, and I was highly concerned because we obviously had, I think it was 220 kinder enrolments last year. And coming from Oran Park, we know that the kindy groups get bigger and bigger because it is a young area. I think there was 250 this year, potentially. I don't know 100%. But I was like, can we not rezone Gregory Hills new parents to Burramurra in the meantime or something? And no one would listen. But it's very frustrating that there's a half-empty school 8 minutes away and there's a school beyond capacity about to become a construction zone that they just keep sending people to.
No, that sounds ludicrous. And my second question from Peter Sidgrave's office, is that still the completion schedule for Gregory Hills School? It'll take 8 years to fully finish that school in 2030, which just seems bizarrely, lengthy construction schedule, 8 years to do a school on that site.
So that came out when we first started asking questions and we couldn't get a date. That date was found out maybe early last year or mid last year. And then literally the day after that went to the media, that's when Gladys Berejiklian, Sarah Mitchell and Peter Sidgraves came out to the Gregory Hills site, and they then announced that it would be in the next budget. And the latest date that we've had now is potentially it will open around 2025. So they have
that's a lot better.
brought it forward, but it's still nothing in writing. It's just that we've heard they did like an open day, and the people that were planning it said 2025 it's looking like.
Okay, well that's a lot better. But to help the school support groups, our committee can write to the Minister to say what is the exact construction schedule and planned opening date at Gregory Hills, and can we do something about ending the out of area restriction on Burramurra to fill a school that's obviously needed, given the overflow at other schools in the district. So we'll do those two things and forward to you an answer to try and give you the up-to-date, accurate information from the Minister's office. Other questions?
Yeah,
Courtney?
thanks very much, Miss Latham, and thanks very much, Hannah and Kate, for your time and for your campaign that you've been doing. As the Chair said, we've had the opportunity to come out and see Gledswood Hills, so we understand, Kate, when you're talking about the angle of the playground, we very much are familiar with that. And the fact that you're going to be losing about half of that space for the upgrade, which, I mean, anyone should have seen that upgrade should have been part of the initial build of the school, right? Like, it just, when you're talking about a kindy intake of 250 kids, like that's half the actual capacity of the initial school. I can't understand that. So thank you very much. I wanted to first of all ask you about just the way you kind of alluded to this a bit in the in your initial comments, but the way that the government's communicated with you, you moved to this area, you were promised a school. Actually, let me ask you that first. How was the school? How did you know that there was space for a school? Was it because it was signposted? Was it promoted to you when you were purchasing your block?
Yeah, it was listed as a proposed school by the Dart West company that was the developer of Gregory Hills. It was shown in their display. So their sales office had a plan of the area and the future stages that would be built, and there was a proposed school on that site. I had found out that there was, it wasn't until obviously this whole process started and we actually started questioning that the school was required to be built as part of the approval for the construction of the estate here at Gregory Hills. But at the time we just assumed that they said like this is the proposed school, and like they were using that to sell to families to buy lots of land here, because to me, if I hadn't have known that was there, it would have put me off purchasing the land here, because I believed that there was going to be a school there, that my kids could one day walk to school from the place where we purchased our land. I'm less than a kilometre from the site, and that was like the real appeal. Like when we purchased the land, I was pregnant with my second and I had an 18-month-old. So that was a really important thing that brought us to this area. We've been previously in an existing area that had plenty of schools available, but just at the time, the best option for us was to move to a new area and build a new house, and we would have the infrastructure there ready, like they didn't have any dates or anything, but they said that there would be a school. So that was what was proposed and sold to every family who bought in Gregory Hills. Like there was, this proposed school. Knowing what I know now, obviously we've been waiting, expecting it to happen, but haven't known the length that would happen.
Yeah, and Kate, it's reasonable if you're purchasing a block when you're pregnant with your child and you've got an 18-month-old, like you're giving them a bit of a lead-in time. You're not saying I've got a 4-year-old and I'm moving in and so I expect a school built. You're being reasonable, but the government hasn't been reasonable in this case. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. I definitely think that it's not being reasonable. There was families that had been there, at least 4 years before we had moved in that were expecting a school. And since then, their children have gone to high school and they've missed the complete opportunity of one of the reasons why they would have bought there in the first place.
Can I just check, Kate? Sorry, Wes Fang, Deputy Chair. Did the developer say to you that the land was for a school that had been given to the Department of Education at the time? Because it's my understanding that the land wasn't actually handed over to the department until like last year.
Yes, that's right. The land wasn't actually handed over by the developer until last year. But
so the developer didn't declare it to you that the land actually wasn't made available to the department at all until last year?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question from Anthony Deaton.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I had a couple of questions. One was, I wanted to ask about whether the department has recognised the community support for Gregory Hills Public School as a point for consultation about the future developments of the school at Gregory Hills. Like, is there like a formal point of contact with the department, a project lead, or someone who your group can liaise with to try and get information about progress of the construction of the school?
You would think so, but no. I've reached out multiple times. They obviously know that the group is there. They're never forthcoming with information. I always have to ask the question, and often it's not responded to, or I get a generic response, or I get, it's usually just a generic response. But so many times, like for example, there was a meeting for the community to come out and see the plans for Gregory Hills Public School, and originally they had posted that it was going to be at Narellan Town Centre, and then they changed it to Gregory Hills Town Centre, but I didn't see the change and no one told me. So a member of the community, a couple of members of the community actually messaged me and were like, did you see this post saying that it's now at Gregory Hills? You'll have to update your post so everyone knows to go to Gregory Hills and not Narellan. And I'm like, why wouldn't their office call me? Because they know that
They don't exist, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And why do you think it is that the department aren't forthcoming with the information?
I think it started with the fact that they knew that, like if you look at the documents that I sent through, originally Gregory Hills Public School is marked as it needs to be open by 2023, not negotiable. Like not negotiable is ticked. And then they've at some point changed it to a 2-stage build starting in 2027. So I think when we started asking questions, they knew, oh no, we've pushed this school back and this school's over capacity after a year. Like they haven't got any good news to give us. That's what I'm assuming. They've seen that we've accepted what happened at Oran Park, 48 demountables, thousands of kids, traffic, going in and out. They've seen that we dealt with it because we knew it was a new suburb, and I feel like they've probably assumed that we would be okay with it continuing at Gledswood Hills, but as parents who moved out of Oran Park, it's like, this is not right. They can't keep selling blocks of land, and the blocks of land getting smaller and smaller, getting more families in here without adequate infrastructure. It's just not right.
So it's fair to say there's a transparency problem with the department.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Can I also, we've obviously done a site visit at Gledswood Hills. I wanted to ask about what it's like to pick your kids up in the afternoon.
It's a nightmare.
Can you tell us a bit about what happens in the afternoon given there's so many kids to be picked up?
Can I just ask a supplementary question to that, which is, what time do you have to get there to get a park?
Some parents get there at 2 o'clock, but I don't have that kind of time up my sleeve. I just walk or I park further away. and Kate, I know, parks quite far away as well, because that chaos really close to the school, I feel like it can be quite dangerous because there's not enough spots, the streets are really small. On top of that, we've got construction just around the corner, so there's often huge trucks coming down those roads. Construction's about to start in the school, so that's going to add a lot of heavy vehicles.
That construction site is directly across from the school, the top gate. It's directly across, and there's B doubles coming down the street at the time of school, like the gates open half an hour before the bell goes in the morning, and there's B doubles going down that street while these parents are trying to cross their kids to the school gate. And in the afternoon, the same thing. They have B doubles coming up and down the road, and that road is not very wide, even though they have like parking shoulders. But yeah, sorry,
It's not enough. And then on top of that, the things like the back gate, parents have to call and complain to get not even a crossing. What's that thing called where they put the flags up and it says children crossing, but it's not an actual crossing?
Yeah, it's like a safe place to cross, but it's not
And
designated.
A refuge.
And the principal sometimes goes out there because it's just chaos. Someone has to try and help get these kids across the road safely, and you know, it's not planned well whatsoever for the 600 that it is built for, let alone the, I don't know, is it nearly 1,200 in there now? I don't know the exact numbers, but it's chaos. And like I was saying, I live in Gledswood Hills, so I would love to say to my kids, yeah, you can walk home. We're too close to get the bus pass, like technically in the route thing, we're just a little bit too close, but I can't have my kids walk home because it's crazy, too many people, trucks, not adequate crossings, yeah.
The kiss and drop zone is always full of cars, that back street. There's the kiss and drop zone, then there's the road, which you can fit 2 cars going either side, but if people park all down the side across, like where the lake is, in that green space opposite, it is bumper to bumper through there, and the teachers are there until at least 3:10, with people trying to get through to get close enough to the school to pick up their kids from kiss and drop. I do park a few blocks away and walk up the hill to get there, because I just don't want to go near it. And even though my kids could catch the bus from Gregory Hills, it's overcrowded. I would not let them. It's too dangerous, and and the same thing to walk home. Even if I was within walking distance, I agree. You could not let a primary school age child, unless at least they're in year 5 or 6. It's so dangerous. There's not enough safe places to cross. And kids go in all different directions from the school. So there's multiple exits, there's 3 exits, and the crossing is at the top across the main road. But they have put a couple of refuge islands in further down the Hermitage Way, but it's not actually near the school. But there's pram ramps and spots to cross all around that roundabout, which shouldn't have been put there in the first place unless they were going to have a refuge island around it, because it's just, there's no way they're safe to cross for them.
Can I ask, just as a follow-up, have you seen or are you aware of any near misses in terms of sort of dangerous incidents where kids potentially have been, close to harm?
I haven't witnessed any, but the parents have a Facebook group for the school, and there's been a number of times I've seen parents commenting about how a child was nearly hit either on a bike or walking, but I've not witnessed any myself, but I have seen parents who were the person who saw it, or it happened right in front of them, and they obviously, it wasn't, no child was hit, but it's very,
It's a matter of time.
scary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
I think we're
Thank you.
time.
Unless there's one last question, our time has expired for this session. I want to thank Hannah and Kate for your participation. Very good submissions and information backing up our visits to these sites. And if we get some information from the Minister's office, as I mentioned earlier on, we'll pass it on to you as quickly as possible. But I think all of us would agree that the lack of communication, keeping you up to date, is a problem, and
Absolutely.
a good subject for some of our recommendations when we develop our committee report. So thanks, Kate and Hannah.
Oh, it's all right. I'll
Can I
do a
mention one
supplementary.
more quick thing?
Yep.
Just high schools is another huge issue. There's
Yeah.
not enough high schools out here. And we're struggling to get anyone to communicate with us about where our kids are going to go to high school. Our kids are in year 3 and we're like worried about that now.
Yep. Yeah, we did visit Oran Park High School, which is a great facility, but you need another one of those. Plus, we're been urging on the selective high school that's supposed to be built at Leppington. So
Yeah.
we're across that
The thing
too.
I'll just say is that Gregory Hills residents are not actually permitted to attend at Oran Park. It's out of the area for us. We're still relegated to going to Mount Annan High School.
Right. Okay. Can you go to Eaglevale?
Well, technically our
catchment.
within the boundaries that we're in, the requirement is that we have to go to Mount Annan. And there's no school bus that goes from Gregory Hills to Mount Annan. The kids have to get to Narellan on a public bus and then change and go to Mount Annan.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a fair hike crossing Narellan Road. So that's surprising. You'd think, given you haven't got a high school, you'd have the flexibility of choosing between Eaglevale, Mount Annan, or Oran Park.
I know of a parent who had her sons in the same year, so they were in kindy together, but he has an older sister who's just started high school this year, and she kept them at Oran Park public school, and then the Oran Park High School opened, and she had to apply as an out of area on compassionate grounds because her son was still there, and it would mean that then they wouldn't be in the same place anymore. So she said it was really difficult to get her daughter into Oran Park so that they could still, because they're right next to each other, so that they could be picked up and conference together.
Okay. Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Hannah. We
No
have to
problem.
move on to our next session, and we'll pass on that information as it comes to hand.
Thank you.
Thanks for being involved today. We could ask Libby to come forward, please, from the Marsden Park P&C.
Great lead-in. Question about high schools.
Thanks, Libby, for attending today. And if you could state your name, position, and swear either the oath or affirmation.
My name is Libby Clark. I'm the Vice President of the PNC at Marsden Park Public School. The affirmation. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And would you like to make a short opening statement, please?
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me and taking the time to, have this inquiry. Hopefully that any recommendations you give are handed down, passed on. I am the daughter of a primary school principal, so retired primary school principal. So I know how difficult things are and how things move very slowly with the department and things like that. I have many friends that are teachers, primary and high school, and obviously lots of family friends. So this isn't something that I'm here to bash the Department of Education. I understand what an amazing job the teachers, the principals, everything does. But my unique opinion is that I work in the construction industry. So I work for a company that has a Sydney Water contract. All these new suburbs, Marsden Park where I live, Gregory Hills, we exclusively were developing Gregory Hills, Willowdale at Oran Park, we did Oran Park, all these greenfield subdivisions that are going on, we're involved. And we're involved very, very early in the piece. So what astounds me is the government knows how many lots are coming. Who moves into these new houses? Young families. Yes, we're here to talk about school infrastructure, but, you know, the roads are never ready, the schools are never ready, and it just astounds me that the government knows how many people are coming. They know the lots. The master planning is done years before the first lot is sold. And that is where I think that there is a downfall. And that's what concerns me.
Right. Yeah, well, it's astounded me for about 45 years living in Western Sydney. I've got to say that we don't get facilities in as the people are arriving, but this is our historic struggle, which is ongoing. And in your submission, you make the telling point that there's 1,600 students combined at Northbourne and Marsden Park Public School, but no high school that's being built to accommodate the inevitable flow of 1,600 and rising students through to secondary education. What's another astounding thing is really sometimes the inability of the local MP to actually get these things done. Primarily, it's the function of the person you've elected to state parliament. Who is your member of parliament there, and what updates do they give you about the capacity to build this high school that's desperately needed?
Coincidentally, our MP for where we live in Marsden Park is Prue Carr. She has been fantastic, helping us campaign, and she has been very, very helpful. We have dealt with Kevin Connolly as well, who on the other side of Richmond Road is, before we started campaigning for the high school, we had huge issues at Marsden Park Public School before Northbourne was built. Prue even helped us even a lot more than Kevin Connolly, because even though it was out of her electorate, it was affecting the people in her electorate, because Richmond Road is the boundary. The school's on one side and the estate's on the other side. So she was very, very helpful as well.
And what update have you got about a site, purchasing land, getting going with the high school? Is there any progress at all? The site is there?
Yep, the site is there. Now, what was very surprising was we've been out there, we've seen the site, and then when we were given a plan, it shows half the site is a high school and half the site is another proposed primary school. How they're going to fit it will be architecturally genius. But I don't know the ownership of the land, whether it's still owned by Stockland or whether it's owned by the department. I'm not sure. The department has issued some information to us, and recently they had a virtual meeting room, I think they called it, where we could go on and see the pretty pictures of what it's going to look like. The only thing that wasn't there, and it was the only piece of information everybody wanted, was a commitment date when it's going to open. Yeah, it looks great. It looks really pretty. It's the latest and greatest of everything. So I reached out to them and said, it looks lovely. When's it going to open? Oh, we can't commit to
Is there any starting date?
Nothing.
Nothing. No starting or finishing.
I did have a meeting, and I think my information was passed on from school infrastructure, with a private company that's doing the social impact statement for the school, and talking about when the SSD was going to be submitted. They were aiming for sometime late this year. But like I said, I work in the construction industry. I know how long these things take.
Yep.
So there was no commitment date even when the SSD was going to be submitted.
Other questions?
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks, Ms. Clark, very much for your time, and I appreciate your unique position as well. I wanted to first of all ask you about we went out to Northbourne. We understand that there's huge development that's going on through Marsden Park on both sides of Richmond Road. So at the moment, your kids would have to travel an hour and 20 minutes to the nearest public high school?
Riverstone, yes.
Okay. And you say in the initial plans there's a public primary school and a high school on the same site?
On the same site, yeah.
Do you know roughly how big the site is?
No.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I could have found that out, but I don't know.
That's all right. And in terms of you make the point that the communication hasn't been great from the government. How responsive have they been to your concerns that you've raised or parents have raised with the process? I've
been dealing with different government departments since my oldest son started school in 2018. Mm-hmm. There was 60-something children at the school. There was 9 kids in kindergarten. Wow. We were very early in the estate. It was like a little country school. By the time he was in year 1 and 2, there was approximately 800 kids at the school. It was enormous growth. It has now filtered back down now that the kids have gone to Northbourne. Our school's down to a few hundred, 3 give or take, whereas Northbourne is well over capacity. And what the ladies were talking about earlier about the boundaries, the children that left Northbourne, that left Marsden Park and went to Northbourne, some families wanted to come back and they were told no, because they're now out of area enrolments. So I've got 3 boys. One hasn't started school yet. He starts next year. And but my oldest is in year 4, and I know how long it takes to build a high school. I touched in there that when Northbourne was built, it was they had ridiculous plans in place to bus the children back and forth. It's in my letter. But they the thing is, when you build a demountable school, they could do that at Northbourne. They could put the children into demountables on the oval whilst they built the school next door. You can't do that with a high school. With, your woodworking and metal labs and your science labs and your kitchens and things like that, you can't build a demountable high school. So something very, very interesting in the census results that I was looking at was there are more children in the Marsden Park postcode. There are more children in non-government schools, high schools, non-government schools than government schools, because in our area, within a 5-minute drive, there is St Luke's Catholic College, Australian Christian College, Norwest Christian College, and Richard Johnson Anglican, all within 5 minutes of driving. But there's no high school.
So this brings me to my next question, which is the independent schools, the Catholic schools, they've been able to get their act together and build. They've clearly seen a need and they've built schools and they've managed to do it in a reasonable time frame. So what choice does that give you as a parent? You can either take the public school option where your kids have to travel an hour and a half, or you've actually then got to leave the public school system.
Yeah, and, a lot of, I talk as a generalisation, but a lot of young families that move to these areas with young kids, some people don't have a lot of money to send these kids to the non-government schools, which is why state schools are there. The growth in our area, not so much Marsden Park, but on the other side of Richmond Road, Blacktown Council in the last few years actually created a bunch of new suburbs because the growth was so astronomical. And I know that the reason for it was something to do with emergency services and planning and things like that. But, they've done that, but there's still no high school. The fact that they can't see the need for it and they're not rushing it is just very, very frustrating.
So just to be clear though, there is a site there that's available for Marsden Park High School to be built on, and we can ask some questions about the actual ownership of the site. And do you know when the site was identified?
I don't.
Okay. But it's been in common knowledge that that's the site and,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and we've been out there, and definitely the paperwork that we've received, information packets we've received from the department confirms that is the site. What we were surprised with in the last couple of months when we received the information was that half is a primary school and half is a high school, but any high school will do at this stage.
I understand. Yeah. I've got a few more questions, but I might pass back to my colleagues because I don't want to take up all the time.
Yeah, Wes Scott?
I'm just curious about the land that's been identified. That's separate, is it not, to the other site that's got the co-located primary school, high school? Is that correct?
No, it's the one site. So
That's
there's
the one site.
it's actually in a suburb called Malonba, which is, it's essentially Marsden Park. They just created a new suburb name. But it is one large square site that half is planned for a high school.
The plans to build something like Riverbank.
Yes, and
Well, I guess we're saying it at
Are you aware
Riverbank
of the
and
issues at
Forum
Riverbank?
Park as well.
Yeah.
And so that site has been funded in the budget, is that
yes,
correct?
for the high school, as far as I know, not the primary school. The primary school is, although Northbourne is over capacity at the moment, the primary school there is not the major concern at the moment. It is the high school.
Okay.
Anthony Diadam?
Not sure.
Sorry.
Behind
Yeah, look, I wanted to ask about, so this high school proposal at Malomba is, where is that in terms of the infrastructure, school infrastructure, staging? Is that still in the planning stages? Is that how it's described?
The high school, I think it's well into the planning stages. There is a site plan, but apart from a site plan, I've seen nothing else.
So, I mean, there was a significant underspend in terms of the proposal. As I understand it, the budget had 9.9 million allocated, but they've only spent 3.6. Can you tell us a bit about I suppose, the communication from the department about where the process is up to? Like, how are they keeping you informed of the development of the proposal?
Yeah. We receive a letterbox drop. I think over the last couple of years we may have received 2 or 3, just A4 pieces of paper dropped in the letterbox, and our school often puts it out in our communication app. Originally, it started with, we're in pre-planning. I don't know exactly where it's up to because we haven't received any information for a while. It'd be quite a few months since we've received something.
So so there's not regular public meetings about the proposal?
No, there's not. They have said that they would like community consultation, but community consultation is probably the biggest downfall we've experienced with school infrastructure, so I don't have high hopes for it.
So Ms. Clark, Sorry, Anthony, just wanted to clarify. So just in terms of the plans that you were shown of the new school and that you were talking about, through what channel was that? Was that with the P&C or was that...
It was a letterbox drop.
That was a letterbox drop.
I'm assuming most people in the estate received.
Yeah.
And then it was just kindly, obviously, issued through our school app in case anybody had missed it.
Thank you. Sorry, Anthony.
So I was just going to say, is there not a way for interested members of the community to sort of register for regular updates? Is that something that the school infrastructure has made available to the community?
On the occasions that I've emailed school infrastructure directly, it takes some time to get a response and then it's generic. There's been no sign-up information. No, where you enter your email address, for updates. No, there's been nothing like that. The virtual consultation room, I think they called it, that they did, you could submit a question. I did submit a question, which was commitment date, and they did get back to me. They called me a few weeks later, and her name was Jermaine that I spoke to at School Infrastructure. She was very helpful, but she couldn't answer my direct question. She didn't have that information available or was not allowed to share it.
And is that person, are they a sort of designated project lead, or is there a point person that the new school infrastructure provides to the community?
Not that I'm aware of yet, no.
Field inquiries?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Oh, okay, that's all for me.
Courtney?
All
Can I
right.
just ask a couple of things? Just in terms of when did this process happen in terms of the letterbox drop and the virtual consultation program you're talking about?
The virtual consultation was only in the last 2 months or so.
Okay, yeah.
The letterbox drops have been happening for probably a couple of years, maybe 1-2 years. But it was, we're seeking money in the budget. We now have money in the budget. Here is a site plan, but very slowly and not answering anybody's question of a commitment date. If they told us, it's not going to be till 2030, at least then we know and we need to make arrangements for our children. It's going to be my limited experience in construction, but I would say it's going to be at least probably a 2-year build.
Yeah.
My son's in year 4. So people need to start either budgeting for the non-government schools, making arrangements for travel to the local high school.
Yeah.
People need to plan these things.
And from the site that's been identified, and you're saying, is that a flat, easy site, or is that a site that's got some challenges? I guess we're going back to the experience of Gledswood, where there's quite steep sort of...
It's a master plan community. It's completely
so
flat, completely flat grade. But there are houses on three fronts of the property. And, the trucks, the construction, it will upset residents. In saying that, they bought a house opposite a proposed school. So,
and they're going to get the benefit of having a school.
They're going to get the benefit.
So,
yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just check?
One other question that just came to mind. You mentioned about the issue of budgeting for private school fees, given the uncertainty around the completion date for the high school. Is it fair to say that the community in this area thinking about cost of living are very sensitised to interest rate rises. And
Absolutely.
That will squeeze local budgets, and that's the capacity to be able to send your kids to a private school if the state fails to provide a public option is going to put real pressure in terms of cost of living for this community.
Absolutely. I mean, I can talk, obviously, in my experience and my close friends' experience, but I would assume in the Marsden Park area where the new estate is, I would say there are a lot of mortgages, and absolutely the cost of living, the rate rises, and then adding essentially private school fees on top of it would strain a lot of houses. Absolutely.
Can I? Sorry.
Yeah, Wes?
I was just going to ask Ms. Clark, in relation to the build of the school, obviously you've got experience in construction, but have you had the opportunity to see some of the new, modular schools that have been built around New South Wales, and have they spoken to you about the ability for those to be built off-site and then re-established on the actual school site itself, where it's effectively a prefab construction?
Precast. No.
So it's been happening a few times. Those construction dates are around a year. So would that fit into the timeline that you've?
That would be wonderful. Well, for me personally, but yeah, that would be great, because my concern was, like I mentioned earlier, that you can build a demountable primary school. The kids just need a classroom, somewhere to sit, the technology in the classroom. But the high school, that seems to be more difficult. Yeah. So if there are precast schools that are built,
it seems that I think that people have this picture of the old way that construction used to happen, where it was built on site, whereas obviously off-site construction and then re-establishing it on site seems to be a lot quicker. And I understand that it can actually happen in around 12 to 13 months. So they haven't spoken to you about that
no,
as
they
a possibility?
Haven't. Northbourne was built very quickly, the primary school. That was built in 12 months. And it's a 2, 3? I haven't actually been in
That
there.
was one of those prefab.
Yeah. And,
so they can. So yeah, no. I'll just.
and if that's the case, wonderful.
Yeah. No, just when you talked about the 2-year, it just triggered in my head that we've had a look at some of those sites, and they are actually very quick to build, and you wouldn't. They outwardly they appear no different to a regular school.
That would be great. I don't have issues with demountable classrooms like I know a lot of parents do. Once the children are in the classroom and they've got the bright colours and the interactive whiteboards and things like that, they could be in any classroom. So I'm not here opposed to demountables. My concern was that you don't get offered the the woodworking in the kitchens and things like that as you would in a constructed high school.
Yeah, and the point you make, Ms. Clark, is that then the demountables are on the oval, so there's less play space, and that's, going back to the Gledswood Hills that we were talking about before.
Absolutely.
Like, schools are planned for a certain number of students.
Yes.
And do you know if the proposed school has got a school oval in it?
It does.
School? Okay.
Yeah, it does. There was, basically we were shown an oval, parking, 3 stories. The building is 3 stories, and I think there was some undercover area like the COLA that the schools have. I believe there was something like that as well.
Do they have a school hall?
I don't recall, but I'm sure it does.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, they do, because there was areas for performances.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, there was a hall.
Right, thanks.
Ms. Clark, can I just ask your assessment of community expectations about how many demountables any school could have? Because you've made a really good point that it's hard to build a demountable high school with the vocational education offerings that are needed today. But and we've heard accounts, and it's true, at Oran Park at one stage they were edging up towards 50 demountables, and at Riverbank there's a sea of demountables there. What do you think? There's basically a community expectation that no school should have more than 50% of its classrooms demountable? They are a higher standard of facility than they were 20 years ago, but I'm thinking about a suburb like Marsden Park or Oran Park, where people have invested well in a good standard of private housing for themselves. They've got good expectations that government would make similarly excellent provision for the education of their children. Would 50% sort of be the cap for demountables
Can I just-
in terms of public expectations?
Can I just throw a supplementary question onto that as well? I have just found out that they can actually, those specialist classes can actually be done through demountables. There are, so just to that point.
Okay.
That would be fantastic. Look, I don't want to put a percentage figure on it. I know that schools are built for the longevity, not for the boom. So I understand that they build a school, let's say, for 1,000 kids. And yeah, for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it will be over capacity. But then the population changes and, the numbers drop as the young families get older. So I do understand that schools are built for longevity. So I think however many demountables need to be there for the time being, the problem is there enough space for them? Do the children have anywhere to play? Because I know I've got 3 boys. If they don't run around at lunchtime and burn some energy, I feel very, very sorry for their teachers. So you can fit as many demountables on the site as you want. Is there other areas left for the children to play?
And I guess you've gone from that experience through Marston Park, from what you were talking about, where you started at 60, went up to 800, now at 300. I take it there were a series of demountables that were used during that time that the school was at.
Yes, and they're still there.
Yeah.
And
even at 300.
they're empty.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, we're nearly on time, so thanks, Livy, for your advocacy, which has
Thank you very
obviously
much.
been excellent for the quality of your presentation today. You've added some excellent ideas for our report that we then furnish to the government. So
Thank you.
Thanks for
Looking
the work
forward
that you
to
do.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck with it all, getting your high school.
Thank you.
Okay, our next witness is Marnie Coates from Mcdowie Public School near Williamtown in the Hunter Valley, and she's on video conference.
She's here.
She's here?
Joined us.
She's just joined us. Welcome, Marnie, to our inquiry, and if you could please state your name, position, and swear either the oath or affirmation.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marnie Coates. I'm a mum of 3 primary school aged children at Mcdowie Public School, and I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And would you like to make a short statement to the committee, please?
I would, please. Firstly, I apologise for not being able to be there in person. COVID has finally caught up with me.
Oh.
But I am, as I said, a mum of 3 primary school aged children at Mcdowie. I'm also a chemical engineer, and tomorrow I start my new position as Executive Manager of Water at Mid Coast Council. I'm telling you this because I'm a passionate advocate of public education, and I'm also a product of public education. The rapidly expanding community of Mcdowie has been promised a public high school for over 40 years now. Land was purchased in order to build a high school in 1983, and since then various governments have promised a high school in some form or another, promised to start planning or building or designing, but we still have nothing. We bus over 1,000 students out of our suburb to high school every day, and some of them are travelling over 2 hours a day on buses to get to school. There is a current plan by the government to expand 2 high schools that exist in Rainer Terrace, and this is not acceptable given the rate of expansion in our community and the geographical location of those 2 schools compared to the where the students are coming from.
Thank you. Thanks for that, and thanks for battling on the COVID in your circumstances, and thank you for your commitment. 40 years of a broken promise is a hell of a long while. At any time, has a site been identified for this high school at Mcdowie, and why hasn't anyone acted on progressing the site into actual buildings?
I'm not sure about why it hasn't been progressed. The land has been purchased. It's adjacent, and that's been there since 1983. It's adjacent to the current one of our 2 primary schools in Mcdowie. we have had various promises, but nothing has been delivered today.
And is there any update from your local Member of Parliament about the possibility of getting the high school, particularly given could you just explain the level of fast-growing residential growth in Mcdowie? It's not a stable population, is it? As I understand it, you've got suburbanisation effectively, and the need for the high school is going to become more pressing as the years pass.
That's exactly right. So at the moment we're a population of about 7,000. The latest census in 2016, it was about 9,500. There's 1,000 properties currently approved and under construction, and they're predicting that, or the council predictions, that by 2036 there'll be an additional 7,000 dwellings in Mcdowie. Besides that, the surrounding satellite suburbs that would all logically feed a Mcdowie High School are also rapidly expanding. So the community of Karua, for example, there's huge development going on there. And there are the two current high schools which exist in Lima Terrace, where everybody is currently zoned, are both bursting at the seams, and the plan currently is to just expand them. But any expansion that happens won't even meet the current projected growth. So I can just see that we're going to end up in a pretty bad situation for our kids.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah.
Courtney Housos?
Thanks very much, Ms Coates, for your time today. I feel like I'm a relative latecomer to this because I first heard about the need for a Mcdowie High School from the your now local member 12 years ago. So I think but it seems like it's been a very long time waiting.
Who is that? Is that Kate Washington?
Yeah, Kate Washington.
Washington,
So
yeah.
she's a former head of the PNC there at Mcdowie.
Okay, yep.
Public school as well. So can I thank you for your time, for your advocacy, and wish you all the best with COVID. Goodness me, starting a new job in COVID, that's quite a lot. I just wanted to really sort of paint that clear picture. So you've got 1,000, so there's 1,000 public school kids who get bussed out of Mcdowie every day. So obviously there's going to be a number of people on top of that who go to different schools, but there's 1,000 public school kids who get bussed out of Mcdowie every day. Is that right?
There's 1,000 high school kids who get bussed out of Mcdowie every day. We have 2 private schools within Mcdowie, so some are going there, and lots of parents, I guess, try to get their kids into those schools to keep them in the community, but it's not an option for most people. And for example, our brand new Catholic high school that was built a few years ago, they have 20 places available per year for students who are coming from outside of their 3 Catholic feeder primary schools, and all of those Catholic feeder primary schools are from outside the area. So there are some of those students in that 1,000 who are being bussed out of Mcdowie who would logically still go outside of Mcdowie. There are, selective schools, sporting high schools, creative arts schools. But when you take into account the surrounding suburbs who are also busing kids to Raymond Terrace who would logically feed into a Mcdowie High School, there's still around 1,000 students that make up that public cohort of high school students.
Yeah. So you've got a clear need, you've got a site, you've had consistent promises from the government, and no one's actually, and then they've just completely failed to deliver it.
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So and do you think that the demand is going to, or you sort of talked about that in the census data, the demand is going to continue to increase, right? It's not like we're seeing a one-off boom. There is continuing growth both in Mcdowie and surrounds.
Yeah, that's right. I think the last census showed that the median age of people living in Mcdowie is 36. We're a very young family-based community. So there's already a huge proportion of children in the area, and that is only going to increase by about 70% is the prediction by 2036.
Yeah, so it's not, the demand is going to continue to grow. And I mean, and this is my last question before I hand to my colleagues, which is you said there's a Catholic high school, there's a Christian high school. I mean, you've got 2 feeder public primary schools as well, but there are clearly the Catholic system and the independent system have acknowledged and seen that there's a need. They've stepped in, but it's the public school system that's not providing that local option for parents. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
No, I really thank you very much for your time and for your advocacy. It's very, very important. Thank you.
Other questions?
I want to ask about, so did you say Karua is in area for Raymond Terrace? So that the kids from Karua go to Raymond Terrace. That's quite a way to travel each day, isn't it?
It is. So I think the feeder schools currently, there's Saltash, Karua, Lemon Tree Passage, Fern Bay, Tea Garden and Hawksnest. They might not all currently feed into Raymond Terrace, although I suspect they do, but they would all logically feed into a Mcdowie High School.
Right, I see. And I wanted to ask about this, I suppose the process of communication and liaison between School Infrastructure New South Wales and the community in Mcdowie. I mean, this has obviously been a long running issue. So what's the point of contact with School Infrastructure about progressing the agenda of having a high school established at Mcdowie? What does the dialogue look like between the community and School Infrastructure?
There is no dialogue. So I've been in constant contact. I've had sit-down conversations, many with Kate Washington. I've sat down with Shadow Minister Prukar for Education, I should say. Federal Ministers Meryl Swanson and Tanya Plibersek have both also expressed their support for a high school in Mcdowie and are sort of willing to help assist with federal funds for some of the ancillary infrastructure if the state is prepared to build a high school in Mcdowie. I've had conversations with Angelo Gabrielata from the Teachers Federation.
Love Sarah.
I've had support from all the Port Stephens councillors. I am hearing nothing from the minister. Whenever, I guess my main line of communication is through Kate Washington's office, and whenever she has raised the issue in Parliament, which I believe has been, well in excess of, I don't know, there's probably 15 to 20 times over the last 15 years, there's just no response, basically.
So has there been any communication about why the School Infrastructure would choose to expand the Raymond Terrace high schools as opposed to build? Like, is there not some communication from School Infrastructure about a trigger point that would say, okay, well, if the community in Mcdowie meets these conditions, then that will be the trigger for us to make a decision to actually proceed with building a high school on the site that's been reserved since 1983?
Yeah, so we had that commitment in 2011. At that point, I was dealing with Adrian Coley, and who was the minister for education then. He promised to make the high school shovel ready, and then that flipped in 2015, I believe it was, because he said that the 2 current schools in Raymond Terrace were not at capacity, and that was the trigger point for building a Mcdowie High School when those 2 high schools had reached capacity. Those 2 schools were now over capacity, and the response has been, I can only assume from a financial perspective, that it's cheaper for them to stick a few more classrooms onto those schools than it is to properly plan the infrastructure that's needed for Mcdowie.
Okay, but there's been no further communication from the department or school infrastructure or the minister in relation to that, that decision around expanding the capacity of Raymond Terrace versus the construction of a new high school.
No, the only time I've heard from the Department of Education, I heard an interview with a representative on ABC Newcastle. I wasn't invited to comment. I've done so many media things over the last years in relation to Mcdowie High School. You would think if they wanted information about the issue that they would reach out to me or the community group. We've had no correspondence.
So can I just clarify, there's two schools in Raymond Terrace that take kids from Mcdowie. Why is it that it's not just one school that has the drawing area that includes Mcdowie? How is it that it's split between two schools?
I believe it was just for planning back when those schools were built. So originally southern Port Stephens would have been heavily populated in Raymond Terrace, which is the southernmost suburb of our area. And so I guess they built all of the schooling infrastructure there, and then as the suburbs north of that have grown, they've just continued to bus everyone to Raymond Terrace.
Right, that's it. Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Any other questions? If not, Marnie, thanks for your presentation today and all the best in getting over the COVID and the new job that you've got coming up. So we furnish a report and recommendations to the government, and unfortunately Mcdowie's one of a whole series of areas where population growth is not being matched by the provision of essential school infrastructure. So we'll do our best to try and advance your cause, and thank you again for joining us today.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we adjourn the inquiry now until 11:30. And via video conference, we have Susie Forrester and Leanne Berger from the Randwick Boys and Girls P&Cs. So Susie and Leanne, thanks for your participation today, and starting with Susie, if I could ask you just to state your name, position and swear either the oath or affirmation, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Susie Forrester. I'm currently the Secretary of the Randwick Boys High School P&Cs Association. I'd like to read the affirmation. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And Leanne? You'll have to unmute, Leanne.
Sorry.
No, it happens a lot, even to us all the time, don't worry.
My name is Leanne Bergen, and I am currently the Secretary at Randwick Girls High School. I'm a former Treasurer and former Treasurer and Vice President at Randwick Boys High School, and I would like to read the affirmation. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And Susie and or Leanne, it's available to you to do a short opening statement to the committee.
And would you like to go up there?
Sure. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present some information to the inquiry. As I said, I speak as a parent with students at Randwick Boys High School and Randwick Girls High School. I am speaking on behalf of the Randwick Girls P&C, where I am an officer. And as I mentioned, I'm past office bearer at Randwick Boys High School P&C. I was also a secretary at Randwick Public School P&C, where we went through some major upgrades fairly recently. Wholeheartedly committed to public education, and I'm just a little disappointed and do lament current conditions at our public high schools.
Okay. And Susie?
Well, thank you. I'd like to echo and thanks to the committee for this opportunity. It's really very important for our school community, I think, to have this chance to draw some attention to our own situation, but hopefully in doing so make a contribution to what you're doing in looking at school infrastructure across the state. I also have children who are currently studying at both schools. Both of my children are enrolled through Randwick Boys High School, but my Year 12 student is actually currently studying an extension subject at Randwick Girls that wasn't being offered at the boys' school due to low enrolments. We as a school community have been incredibly frustrated through this process. We feel that our school has been identified as having very clear needs, but the failure of school infrastructure to involve our school community in this process has meant that we have struggled with inadequate facilities, which they recognise as dangerous, and it's really impacting on the ability of our staff and students and school community to attract enrolments from our area and to actually support the students that we already have in achieving their own goals.
Thank you. If I could just start the questioning by saying that, that seems to me the summary of your circumstance is you've been given the runaround for many, many years as to the future of these schools. Has there's been an amalgamation proposal for the two schools as well as the infrastructure renovation problems, rebuilding problems? What, in your view, Susie and Leanne, would be the ideal outcome that the school community is seeking from school infrastructure in New South Wales?
Would you like me to speak on that?
Sure.
So, yes, as we've outlined in our submissions, there was a process undertaken in 2019 to consider the reclassification of Randwick Boys High School as a co-ed school. So under that proposal, Randwick Girls would have remained as a single-sex girls' school and the boys' school would have converted to co-education. The support of the parent community and the responses in the survey that was done as public consultation were positive in terms of supporting the change for the boys' school to co-ed. The department decided on balance that once they considered other implementations that would not go ahead. So it actually took quite a long time for that. The time between the outcome of the survey and the actual decision was several months. So we do understand that there have been some delays at our school as a result of that process going on. And there was frustration at the time in that it was felt that the boys' school community and the community generally were in favour of the change. But at that point, we felt that if a decision on that had been made, we should simply be moving ahead with the infrastructure upgrade that both schools really needed. And the issue has, to my knowledge, been bubbling along. Leanne and I have both attended meetings of the Eastern Suburbs PNC Alliance, and there is certainly interest from our local primary schools in more opportunities for co-education in our area. I understand that Rose Bay High School is over enrolment at the moment. They're over capacity because of the demand for co-educational places at our end of our school community group. I think we are certainly now at the PNC exploring opportunities for students to take advantage of offerings between the two schools. So I think effectively at this point we have said if the department's made the decision, it's not going ahead. We want the upgrades to our schools so that our physical infrastructure is adequate, like meets the safety standards that's being identified as not meeting, actually gives our students the minimum standards that the department says they should have. And if there are other ways that we can explore further opportunities for interaction between the two schools, we will do that in the context of two separate schools.
Right, so overwhelmingly the community priority is upgrading these unsafe, ageing facilities, not necessarily to go back and revisit the proposition of co-ed at the boys' high school. You want to get decent facilities there as top of the list.
But it does seem to be that there is interest in the community in the co-ed situation.
Right.
But at this point, our current students now have been in facilities that were already being run down and that haven't since been receiving even, our basic maintenance hasn't been kept up. So we are at the point where whatever is happening, the students at both schools need these upgrades to happen now. So if there is a question that we will revisit the co-educational situation, that is at the point where we have to consider that as a separate matter because the students at this point are being disadvantaged.
Right.
So if there's a situation in which a decision is made to consider the upgrades in terms of the possibility of a later amalgamation, that is something that could be done. But at this point, it does seem that the focus very much is on getting the upgrades done for the students that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Sorry.
Wes Fang, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for appearing today. I noted in the opening statements there was some talk around dangerous components to the school. Can I confirm, is that the construction fencing that's currently up in the school itself? Is that was referred to as a dangerous component of the school infrastructure?
Well, the buildings are not meeting building codes. There is concrete camps up throughout the facilities. There has been asbestos identified and I think removed from around the toilet blocks. We do have a number of witches' hats and construction fences around the property. But
Okay.
Certainly,
So when you said dangerous,
absolute heaters in classrooms as well.
okay. When you said dangerous, when you're talking about the construction fencing, is that work that the P&C was involved in commissioning?
There is some construction fencing around a portion of a garden that was being built last year. I don't know why there would be still construction fencing there.
Okay.
Just add, do you mind? I think there were our concerns about dangerous situations were also triggered by the final business case for the project that indicates that we don't meet building codes and that there are concerns about fire safety and emergency management systems as well.
Okay. But there is a plan underway for all the upgrades, is that correct?
We don't know.
So this is our point, that we've not been given updates on the current status of our project at all. The reason that we have information about what we should have expected is that we were given a copy of the final business case, not by School Infrastructure New South Wales. Any representatives that the school actually had involved in the process of producing that were required to sign confidentiality agreements so that they were unable to fully inform us about what decisions were being made or to inform our representative about our wishes with regard to what was happening. We haven't actually had a full outline of what we should expect from school infrastructure at any point. So we are now aware that our project was put forward in 2021 to Treasury with a proposed series of funding amounts for the various budget years and a proposed completion date, but none of that information has ever been communicated to us by School Infrastructure New South Wales, and in fact letters that we have sent not realising that this business case contained this information have simply repeated very general statements around effectively press release level statements about the project and then referred us back to the School Infrastructure website.
But there is...
Our project never seemed to move beyond the planning stage.
There has been...
The final business case has been done.
There has been, however, funding announced in the 21-22 budget, is that correct? And then the department has been working with the school leadership and the P&C, is my understanding, for the development of the scope of works. So it's the information that I have is certainly contrary to what it is that you're presenting now.
Are you referring to the one parent representative on the PRG?
Well, as my understanding that the school infrastructure is working closely with the school leadership and the P&C to in relation to business cases, they're normally commercial in confidence, so they're not often released because tenders can often be written around business cases as opposed to best practice. So commercial in confidence sometimes plays a role there, but certainly my understanding is that the funding and the consultation is very much underway and has been quite. It's progressed to quite a reasonable stage.
But they've only spent $154,000 despite promising $5 million last year.
Right. Leanne and Susie?
So $5 million was in the budget for 2021-22. According to the final business case, that number should have been $10,060,000. So $5 million, right? Did that $5 million then roll over into what was then just recently announced, 2022-23 budget, 3.755, which should have been $29,370,000 by the business case. So we don't know, is the $5 million plus the 3.755 getting us part of the way through? We don't know. We've never been told this information. We need to seek this information through our local member or by trawling through the budget papers.
Who's the local member, Michael Daly?
Marjorie,
right. Further questions?
Yeah,
Anthony, do you have?
We have $8.755 million passed away for part of our upgrade.
Okay.
That's a question we'd like to ask.
I didn't mean a school being
Can I?
$100,000 spent so far.
Anthony, did you have a question?
Take the lead on this one.
Okay, Courtney.
We also had some concerns that as far as the final business case was concerned, they did outline a basic option, and that was described in terms of make safe and keep operational. So the absolute basics of what would need to be done to our school to make it meet that description. And that those for the two high schools, that involved an amount of $15 million between them. So there's, in terms of that, that's the absolute minimum. We haven't even been allocated that amount of funding at this point. And I think the point that we're trying to stress is even if things are happening that's not being communicated, what is happening isn't matching what we would expect based on this document. And we are really quite nonplussed that the assumption around this entire process is one of secrecy. The fact that we're dealing with an organisation who appear to be designed to produce a publicly defensible decision about how our funds are allocated by following a clearly outlined process and set of criteria, and yet as a PNC, we've struggled to actually obtain any information. As I said, our only representative was asked to sign a confidentiality agreement that meant she couldn't communicate details to us, and that we were unable as a PNC, as a parent representative group, to provide her with information that was specific to what was happening.
Well, I've definitely picked up on the nonplussed attitude, I can assure you of that. Thank you.
Courtney Houshouse.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Can I thank you both, Ms. Bergen and Ms. Forrester, for your time and for your submission. And I think we've all probably seen the photographs in the Sydney Morning Herald today that show the state of the school. Certainly, I should acknowledge our leader, Chris Minns, and local MP, Marjorie O'Neill, were out there just, I think it was last week, having a look at the state of the school. I think you make an excellent point, Ms. Forrester, that $15 million is required just to get it to that safe level of operation. And I might come back to the question about parent reps, because I wanted to just ask you a bit more detail on this point that you made in your submission, which is that the state of the school is then limiting the ability to attract parents. It's obviously an area in the eastern suburbs where there's a host of other Catholic and independent options. There are still parents who are very committed to public school education, as they rightly should be, but when they're being faced with sending their child to a school that doesn't even meet basic safety standards, it's not really a choice then for parents, isn't it? Like it's putting them in an incredibly difficult situation because the government's not holding up their end of the bargain.
And that appears to be something that's acknowledged in the final business case itself. So I was actually this morning looking at the Auditor General's report into the functioning of school infrastructure New South Wales, and the Exhibit 5 is an example of an underutilised high school. So at the moment, we're told that our school has a capacity of 1,080 students. We currently have 680 students enrolled. In this exhibit, it talks about a high school that has students deterred from enrolling due to poor reputation and limited curriculum opportunities. The way that feeds into a lack of enrolments that's seen as a lack of demand that results in no investment in the school. So we do feel very much that that's a situation. And really for us, the fact that we're having to come out today and draw attention to all these negatives about our school is really quite challenging. We have an amazing school executive and wonderful teachers who go above and beyond all the time to provide our students with opportunities. So as I've noted in our submission, our open day parent survey, parent after parent was admiring the teachers and the students and talking about their enthusiasm and how well they represented the school. And then they were saying, but your facilities are substandard. So, as we mentioned in the report, our school captures 22% of the eligible students in our area.
Which is half the state average.
Yeah, which is less than half the state average. So, and talking to other parents from other PNCs at the Eastern Suburbs PNC Alliance, there is very much, there's a real pushback on the idea that, in the Eastern Suburbs, parents don't want to send their children to public schools. It's actually, more a situation, as is recognised in our final business case, of if you provide an inadequate offering, parents will make other choices. And we're in a situation where we're looking at, the idea that our demand for us would grow. You would expect under situations where parents are facing economic stress, as they are now under COVID-19, and in fact our enrollments have gone up over the last couple of years for that reason. So, which we assume is for that reason. But also because our schools are working so hard, our NAPLAN results and our HSA results have been on a steady upward trajectory. As I say, we have a wonderful teaching staff who these levels of self-sacrifice are amazing in terms of how much they actually use their own time to provide opportunities for our students both inside and outside the classroom. And as a PNC, we're doing what we can to support them, but we can't do everything. We can work on what we provide within the school, within the boundaries of our resources. But at the end of the day, parents are looking at a tired, worn-down school with buildings that are over 50 years old and just do not provide the opportunities that students need to achieve their goals.
And these upgrades were promised 4 years ago in 2018. So there's been
announced in 2018. The final business case we now know went through in March of 2021, and we actually not only have had no communication about that, but if you look at the school infrastructure website, our project is still listed as being approximately halfway through the initial planning stage. So it hasn't even been updated to reflect that the final business case has been produced.
Yeah, I mean, those issues about communication and an inability, particularly for parents and school communities, to access information is something that's really come through consistently, particularly this morning, but over the course of our inquiry. One of those issues has centred on the fact that that issue that you raised yourself about the parent rep often having to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So they're there on behalf of parents, but yet can't consult back with parents about what advice they're providing. They also then can't be a communications tool. So it's actually just shutting up the shop even more and shutting out the rest of parents, and actually putting that parent who puts themselves forward in a really difficult situation. How do you think we could have a better system to actually be communicating with parents?
It seems difficult to believe that, we do understand that you can't have every parent in every school involved in every decision at every step of the way. That is not feasible. But the idea that you allow that parent to bring back some information about these are the issues that we're currently discussing. We have a time frame that we need to provide some input. Here are some specific questions that we need to have answered. I would like to be able to take this information back to the next meeting. Can we discuss it? If it is a clearly outlined process, as a parent organisation, we do have limits on the time and attention we can command from our, or we request from our volunteers, because yes, obviously you can't take it from people. But we do recognise people have limited time and attention, but they have a lot of enthusiasm for our school, and they will make time for these things if they're given the opportunity. The fact that we haven't, since the very beginning of the process, no parent who is not our parent has been able to actually find out what's going on or have any idea about the specifics of what's happening, or the way that preferences are being weighted once the discussions have started. So yes, having a structure where there is a list of these are the questions that we need, or the issues that we need some input on. Can you please do that within this time frame, and we will do it.
No, that's a really, they are excellent and practical suggestions, and I really appreciate that. The only, actually, do you know what? I'll leave it there, and then if we have more time at the end, I might ask another question.
Okay. Anthony, did you have some questions?
Yeah, look, I wanted to, one of the suggestions in your submission is about a dedicated community liaison officer. Can you perhaps talk us through why you think that's necessary and how you think that might work or improve the transparency that seems to be, at the core of the approach that school infrastructure have taken to projects like yours?
If I could just answer, a lot of the time we refer to the Schools Infrastructure New South Wales website, where there is a contact us if you'd like to talk about the project, and I've sent a few submissions off and have not heard back. So I've emailed through that contact us, asking specifically about the project, and have not had information. I think when you can just send something onto a generic website, you don't know who's going to answer it. Do people respond to those contact us pages? In my experience, they don't. It's only when I've contacted local members, federal member, that you will get an answer right directly to a minister. So I think that there does need to be a contact person who's responsible to be the bridge between schools infrastructure and the project and the school.
Otherwise, it's like a faceless bureaucracy, isn't it?
It is absolutely a faceless bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And I'd also add to that one of the things that Leanne's drawing attention to is the fact that, if we have limited time as a PNC to actually be able to be involved in this process, we need to know that we're speaking to a person who can give us answers, that we aren't simply contacting a person in a generic call centre version of school infrastructure, that we're actually speaking to a person who knows what's going on in our project and will be able to answer our questions in a timely way.
It's the basic question. Even the basic question of, is the upgrade actually happening? Because that's the biggest question we all have, and it's something that the principals can't answer, the PRG representatives cannot answer. So we don't know, are we actually getting an upgrade? A major upgrade, or are we just getting a make safe, or are we just getting maintenance? Because we've had no PMW funding for 2 years at the girls' school, so who can we ask the question of? I don't know.
So there's been no one come to PNC meetings or brief PNC. It seems like the onus really should be on school infrastructure to proactively communicate what it's doing and how the project is progressing. But it's fair to say there's been no proactive outreach in terms of school infrastructure's efforts to communicate the unfolding of the project.
No, not at all. So we've actually had requested that someone would attend the PNC meeting in 2019, and that went nowhere. The most recent update available on the project on the school infrastructure website is from October 2020. We haven't had any direct communication about what's happening, where the project stands. As I say, we don't know what's happening now. Our approach is to ask for information, being sent back to the website. So no, we haven't.
And the website changes without us having information. Like, so initially the project itself was set with a funding year of 2018, 2019. And so it just highlights that here we are, 2022, asking what on earth is happening to the upgrade. But at today's date, it is reflecting now a 2022-23 budget, which looks kind of a little bit better, I think. But why was that changed?
What about communication through the principal? Is that,
The principal has signed a non-disclosure agreement at both schools, so they're unable to give us much information. So they're in a tenuous position, and parents are at every PMC meeting, what's happening with the upgrades? They've been asking since 2019 or 2018 really, what's happening with the upgrades? And the principal can't answer anything very well. Like they can give no meaningful information.
has there ever been an explanation as to the sort of logic behind the non-disclosure agreements?
No.
What information are they trying to conceal?
Well, that's our question.
That's our question. I mean, this information is really good information. I don't know whether it would give anyone a heads up for a tender for a project, for construction work. I don't think it's at that detail. There's no architectural drawings or there's no quantity surveying. It's just information that talks about the demographics of our school, why we need the upgrades and what the benefits will be once we've got them. I don't know what's so secret about that.
Especially when the totals involved are amounts that were publicly announced at the beginning of the funding process.
And so how does this impact on, I suppose, the community's confidence in school infrastructure if they're very evasive and not forthcoming with information?
It's a bit of a presumptive question, isn't it, Mr. Dion?
I'm posing the question regardless.
Well, it's a question and it's valid, and Susie and Leanne are available to answer it, please.
I'm sure they will.
It certainly hasn't increased our confidence. The thing that I'm particularly struck by is if you read the final business case, it's actually a very thorough document. There's obviously been an attempt to address a set of criteria to make a clear case for why our school needs these works. The fact that there has been so much avoidance of contact and a failure to provide information really has made life very difficult for us as a school community. But school infrastructure is obviously attempting to do what they were supposed to do. The fact that they're not communicating that to us seems very mysterious. And it really doesn't make sense. That the assumption that this process needs to be secret doesn't make sense. As a school community, we should be able to have confidence that they're doing the job. And it appears that they were trying to do that. And this is the thing, we have no explanation of why they've achieved as much as they have, but then not informed us of that. And we then have no information about that document or what's happened since.
Obviously, the government is setting budget priorities. Do you think that more transparency would make the government's decision-making around, prioritising or deprioritising particular projects, more defensible or more, I suppose, palatable to the community? I mean, if there's a strong business case that's been presented, then the government should be able to defend allocating funds to a project like this one.
Well, looking at the auditor's report, the purpose of School Infrastructure New South Wales is to actually provide information that makes that process possible. The reason that we have a business case is so that our project can be viewed in the context of other projects that are being considered at the same time. So the idea that you wouldn't actually allow that information to be publicly available seems to be working against the very reason that they're there.
Thanks, Chair. That's all the questions I've got.
Other questions? Scott Farlow, Courtney, Wes?
No.
Can I just to clarify, It's true that there hasn't been an update on the School Infrastructure New South Wales website since October 2020. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, so that's the most recent update that's available as we logged in yesterday.
If you excluded the budget information.
But in terms of the...
information somehow has been updated.
So if you actually go to the update website, as in updates on your project, that's the most recent piece of information.
So in terms of the... So Ms Bergen, you're saying that they refer you to the website, to look at the website, but they're not updating the website, they're not replying to your emails, they're not providing information back, and yet... I mean, I think you make a good point as well, Ms Forrester, that they're probably trying to get this work done, but it's just that a big part of that is actually about communicating that with parents, and so that they know the scope of it and they can get a sense of what they can understand. I mean, one of the other parents said this morning, we just want to know so we can plan, right? Like they're seeking this information, and then it becomes this issue because they just want to know what's going on. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've mentioned in our submissions that we, for example, at PNC has been trying to, we all have applied or have organised to apply for funding for, through Solar My School for solar panels for our schools. So for our school, the estimate was that we'd be looking at a cost saving of around $17,500 a year for our school. Wow. Our project has been in limbo since 2018 because we've been waiting for information about what was happening with our upgrade. So we were told that the asset management unit wouldn't sign off on our applications because the panels may need to be removed and replaced as part of any works that were upgrades that were happening at the school.
So you're looking at a possible saving of in the vicinity of $70,000.
17.
Yeah, but since 2018, so you're looking now in the vicinity of $65,000 to $70,000 that you could have saved the school, that the PNC wanted to be a partner with the school in, but because of poor communication, because school's infrastructure isn't working with you as it should be, I would say, as a big voice of parents, then they're actually depriving the school of funding under its operating budget.
Yeah. And, that would meet the criteria that the works are supposed to be working towards, like improving the sustainability of the school.
Or is it perhaps a case that the installation of solar panels, which then may need to be removed at even greater expense and perhaps damage some of those panels in the process, instead of waiting for the upgrades to be completed, is probably a better and more sensible solution for the school?
Yeah, well then just get along and do the upgrades or communicate with the parents. There's two options.
Well, yeah. Well, I think they're taking the former. They're getting on with the upgrades, is the understanding that I have. But anyway,
Susie or Leanne, please answer to the question.
Well, in some instances of the business case, like some buildings aren't being touched, so there's no reason to withhold solar panels on a building that's getting a very cosmetic update.
Any other questions?
We can't be held in limbo. So for 4 years, we haven't applied for a significant grant under the CDP funding that would make a real difference to our school. Sure, we put in some outdoor seating because we couldn't do anything more major than that. I've just found out that the MPC, which is our hall, a multi-purpose centre, is not getting any major upgrade. It's getting louvers replaced. Those louvers are actually currently leaking, so I would see that as maintenance rather than an upgrade. So now that I know that the MPC is really off limits for this upgrade, I've applied for a substantial grant for an audiovisual upgrade, which is sorely needed in the school, which will never be part of the upgrade. So now that I've got that certainty, I'm pretty sure, I've gone ahead and done a substantial grant application.
So the point that you make... Oh, sorry, Ms Forrester, you go.
I was just going to say maybe that to push back a little against the idea that the upgrades are underway, because we actually don't know that. So what we've seen at our school is some basic maintenance on the hall at our school, of replacement of the floor. So we actually have no clear information about what's actually happening in terms of any upgrade or the amount of money that our project in total is being allocated or a time frame. We actually don't know what's happening.
And the floor, just to be clear, the floor in the hall of the boys' school was never even on our wish list. It was never factored in as an issue, but all of a sudden we've got new bouncy floors that no one really asked for.
You may not have asked for it, but perhaps there was a need for it. Just a thought.
Yeah,
I think the point. Oh, sorry.
The point is, if there was a need for it, that is maintenance. That's not an upgrade, and we don't actually.
I didn't believe it was called an upgrade.
Or the total plan for our project.
Any other questions?
So I think the point that I guess I'd just finally make is that there's a want or a desire for communication with parents in theory because they should be communicated with. But what you've just outlined is that there's actually significant financial benefits or significant financial consequences for the lack of communication on both schools. So it actually means that you've missed out on grants, or you haven't been able to save the school money on energy savings, or there's other opportunities that have been foregone that have actually seen a further decline in the standard of the school infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's also the fact that there's maintenance that's and minor repair that are being undertaken because we've been told, well, that building will be removed. So we're not investing funds into things that we may otherwise have done as maintenance, because at this point we could be being told that building is being taken away.
Okay. And if I could can I just add something? We're talking about infrastructure, buildings, bricks and mortar, but at the end of the day, there are children and teachers inside these buildings. And at the moment, they're really struggling.
Struggling.
Working and learning in very suboptimal conditions.
Suboptimal. Struggle. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was interested in the comment about the enrolment share based on the overall catchment. And I suppose as a sort of final question, I wanted to ask you, what message do you think this sends, this uncertainty, the delay, about the commitment of the government to delivering public education at a higher standard to your community in the area?
My opinion on this is that it almost seems like the government wants people to go into private and independent and Catholic schools. That's my take on it. And we're like the poor relations. If you have to go to your local public school, you're either hand on heart, totally committed to public education, or you can't afford another option.
That's the message you've got from the government. Interesting.
That's what I get, yeah.
Okay. No, that's telling. I appreciate the...
Okay, you don't have to badger her.
I'm not badgering. I'm just making an observation.
Even Marsden and Waverley College, all of the schools in our area are beautiful buildings. They've had massive land expansion. They've had federal funding. So, whether it's state or federal funding...
Well, then I suggest you speak to your federal member. I suggest you speak to your federal member.
That's not a question.
No.
Any other questions from the committee? If not, I'll thank Susie and Leanne for their participation today, adding to our knowledge and a pattern of issues
Insights
that's come up.
Yeah.
Well, where's...
Don't
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So, may I just say one further thing?
Yes, thanks, Susie.
I thought it was quite interesting in our final business case to see one of the risks associated with the project was dissatisfaction from the school community, and that one of the actions taken to address that risk should be communication with the school community. It does seem that School Infrastructure New South Wales is aware that leaving our Parents and Citizens Association, our school community generally in this situation where we have no information is something that actually acts against what they're supposed to be doing. So we very much encourage that there are some ways instituted for parent communities and for school communities to actually have input into these processes that are supposed to be open to public scrutiny.
Thanks for that. It's an important point, and it is a regular theme that's come up today and other days in our inquiry as to school infrastructure in New South Wales. Do they see themselves as a communications agency or having that component, or they leave it to the media or public advocacy section of the education department? Although I note that recently the department set up a parental engagement unit. I don't know what sort of engagement it's doing. They did a survey that had a pretty paltry response, but maybe that's a good job for the new whiz-bang parental engagement unit to actually engage with parents wanting to upgrade their school infrastructure in your circumstances from a pretty dire situation. So parental engagement, I'm sure, will be a key feature of our report and recommendations to the government. So Susie and Leanne, thanks for your time today, and we wish you all the best with your advocacy and endeavours. And it allows us to move on to our next session, a different set of circumstances, although some similar undercurrents for the Wentworth Point Public School parents. If Clement and Mark could just come forward to the front desk, thank you.
Can't imagine why this could be.
Yes, well, they've set up parental engagement, right?
Parental satisfaction.
Maybe they should do something.
Parental satisfaction.
Clement and Mark are from the P&C at Wentworth Point Public School. Clement and Mark, if you could please state your name, position, and take either the oath or affirmation to be sworn in as witnesses. Clement, thank you.
My name is Clement Nun. I'm the president of the Wentworth Point Public School P&C Association. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Mark.
I'm Mark Green. I'm a member of the Wentworth Point Public P&C. I solely, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And Clement and or Mark, would you like to make a short opening statement to the committee?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, committee. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak today and to be able to represent my community at Wentworth Point. I trust that the committee has read our written submission. So to reiterate, the lack of proper planning and transparent consultation with the community are central to the problems that have occurred in Wentworth Point with the primary school, and also, unfortunately now, still occurring with the new high school. I understand that 2/3 of Sydney's schools have demountables. Look, personally, there's nothing wrong with demountables as a learning space. My kid, is in a demountable. But when these demountables are taking up precious open space, playground space for the kids, it can become detrimental to children's development. Unlike greenfield suburbs where there is enough land to support more demountables, land in Wentworth Point is precious. Furthermore, Wentworth Point is unique in that we only have apartments. So families there don't have backyards, unlike those living in greenfield suburbs. So this makes the school playground / open space even more important in our community of Wentworth Point. I'd also like to table the two documents which we've included. One is the Wentworth Point Residents Action Group response to the proposed joint use agreement for the school oval. This is for the high school oval. And then the second document is the Wentworth Point Resident Action Group submission on the Wentworth Point High School to the Department of Planning and Environment.
Thank you. Mark, did you have an opening statement?
No. Clement's doing ours.
Yep, thank you. Thanks very much. If I could just start the questions, I just wanted to get some clarity. I can see the pressing need for the permanent buildings at the public school, because you've got 14 demountables. There was an expectation of a school for 400 students. You've got 610 enrolled and you're expecting 1,000 over the next 4 years. So they're obvious arguments for permanent buildings at the public school. But on the other side of the equation, on the other side of the land parcel, you've argued that you don't need the high school because in the 2021 census you've only got 219 secondary students living in Wentworth Point. But won't the funnel effect of all those primary students coming through ultimately require a high school for Wentworth Point?
Oh yes, for sure. I I suppose the new high school actually has a big catchment area, so it's not just for Wentworth Point. The high school will service Wentworth Point, Newington, Sydney Olympic Park, and Concord West. So I suppose in my submission, I was just saying that from Wentworth Point itself, because the school, the high school, they're not providing any staff parking. They're only providing 29 car park spaces for staff, and they expect the majority of the students to be travelling by either, active transport or walking. And, for us, I think, judging, looking at the census statistics, it is just not possible because the bulk of the enrolments that we expect will be coming from out of Wentworth Point.
Right, so your argument is that Wentworth Point is not the best place for the high school to be sited because of the loss of parkland, and it serves a broader catchment. What have you got a preferred site for the high school to be established for Newington and the other suburbs that you mentioned?
Yeah, so from my talking with the local MP involved, it was originally the project was called Sydney Olympic Park High School. Only now it's been changed to Wentworth Point High School. So previously they've been talking about I think possible 2 sites within Sydney Olympic Park suburb to have the high school. It only happened, in the last couple of years where they suddenly then decided to, put the high school in Wentworth Point, which, as I've mentioned in the submissions, Wentworth Point is a suburb in a peninsula, only one road in, one road out. It's not the best place, for a high school, especially when they're talking about enrolments of up to 1,500 people. And when, like looking at the census statistics and also the growth patterns, the bulk of the population will actually be centred in Sydney Olympic Park itself. That itself is going to be, according to the government, it's going to be a big city of 50,000 people.
The view that you're articulating, is that the broader community view? Is this sort of the unanimous position of the P&C? Because it seems to me, logically, there might be some parents who want their children to be able to walk to the high school in Wentworth Point and wouldn't be as happy having to go to the Sydney Olympic Park site. I know there's lots of land there and you could do a high school there. Is it a mixed view as to the preference to have the parkland or the high school? And if there's no high school, then the students are obliged to travel a longer distance for their secondary education?
Yeah. It is a mixed view at the moment because the thing is that particular land where the high school is going to be built was also earmarked for apartments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
so not parkland as such, it's sort of open space at the moment.
Open space
but
slash...
have been slated for more apartments.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Anything's better than more apartments, I suppose, in a crowded location like Wentworth Point.
And just on that point, I'm looking actually at the information that's been put up on the planning portal on that, and I think that the zoning on that area is largely a neighbourhood centre, which I imagine will not be taking place because of the high school. And as you quite rightly point out, high density residential across that space and a small part that was for public recreation within that catchment.
Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, thanks very much. I'll pass to my colleague first and then I might jump in with some questions.
Anton?
Thank you both for your attendance today. I suppose I wanted to start firstly with the sort of reoccurring theme that we're hearing from witnesses today about the inadequacy of consultation between school infrastructure and the community. Can you perhaps elaborate on the problems that you've seen in terms of the approach that's been taken by school infrastructure in terms of consultation, both around the stage 2 of the primary school and around the high school proposal?
Okay, I will speak specifically about the high school consultation. The relocation of Sydney Olympic Park High School, and I agree with Clement, the community is split, the P&C is split, so the question that Mr Latham raised about do we want a school in Wentworth Point? We'd like a school that is built once and built well and actually provides for the needs of the community, and that's the whole community of the catchment area from roads. Obviously Wentworth Point is our real concern, Newington, right up to Carter Street in Lidcombe. So it's a fairly big area that it's going to draw on. And we're not necessarily opposed to a school being there, but what we're opposed to is a school that doesn't meet the needs of the students or the community. So the buildings look beautiful, but our real concern is over the facilities that come with it or the lack of them. In terms of consultation, the school has been asked for, I think it's been promised for over 10 years, and the area, as Clement said, there's an existing DA over the area where the school is now going. Landcom, on behalf of Transport New South Wales, had started building a park, had put in a road, brought in thousands of truckloads of soil, wiped out a lot of trees, and then without notice withdrew overnight. And the community asked the question, so what's happening? Why has the park stopped? And there's a lovely timeline and consultation had occurred, timeline on the Landcom website, and no word, no response as to what was going on with the park. And then in the media, sometime later, we found out that the school has been moved down to that site. So that was the consultation. There was zero consultation with the community. So then we were trying to figure out how can you fit a park, apartments and a school, high school, on this tiny piece of land. And some of the vegetation on the peninsula is actually protected. So how does all this fit together? So I guess from the community's perspective, we've been very disappointed with there's been no consultation. Then there's been one information session since, and each time that we raised the questions about, where's the oval, how are the kids going to fit? You've got 1,500 kids. At the moment, the land area in stage 1 is 1 hectare. It's going to be like a, Japanese subway or something where you shove them in, is the way we look at it as a community. And each time we ask the same question, that the standard is one child per 10 square metres of play area. And how do you calculate that? It doesn't add up. If you've got 1,500 kids, and they keep saying, no, yes, it does, but no one can actually give us any answers. There's no real consultation. So there's a high degree of frustration, I guess, is what we would say, because there just hasn't been consultation.
Well, on that topic, has your P&C heard from this much celebrated and announced parental engagement unit of the Department of Education? Wouldn't they write automatically to every P&C and say we're here to engage with parents? That's their job. It was an announcement made by the Minister and the Departmental Secretary, and logically, wouldn't you think they set themselves up basically to say any questions you've got about issues like this, the unit would answer them and get the answers promptly for your P&C?
Yeah, you see, the problem is that the goalpost keeps changing as well. So initially the school...
But have you heard from this parental engagement unit established a few months ago? Have you had any correspondence, any contact from them? Nothing?
No.
Okay, I wonder what they're doing over there. They're not engaging with P&Cs. But you were saying the goalpost move.
So
the goalpost move in what respect?
Yeah, so the high school was first proposed to be 1,500 students, and then now they're coming up with a secondary exhibition for they're reducing it down to 850 students, so that they don't have to build the school oval.
Right. Is that what they've said? That's the official reason the number of students have been
downgraded? So they've now there's a phase 1 and phase 2.
Right.
Yeah, so phase 1 will be 850 students.
Okay. Anthony,
so there is still an intention just on that point, there still is an intention for a phase 2 catering to 1,500 students, is that correct? Or?
That's correct, because in phase 2, phase 1 just has the 850 students, 2 buildings, and 1 temporary basketball court, because they have to apply, I don't understand how it got to this point, but there was an approved road that was built, the land was put in, the soil was brought in, thousands of truckloads. It's still there, and there's apparently an approved DA over it, and that hasn't been rescinded or whatever they do with it. There's no new DCP or DA over the land. So what they're doing is working, as far as I can tell, because we're not communicated with, they're working around that until the new plan comes in. Now, in the new plan, so there's two stages, as Clement said. Stage one has the two buildings, which look lovely, and I think will be great assets to the community and lovely, teaching resources. But the problem with it is there's 850 kids with these two buildings, but only one temporary basketball court for them to use for sports facilities. Now, I'm a former deputy principal, and I've asked everybody I know in the department and said, how, when NESA does their random inspections, if you get to that 850 kids and you've got 2.5 hours a week per child that they must provide in PE, in practical PE lessons, how are you going to do that with one, there's no hall, no fields, one temporary basketball court, that's it. So I'm just at a loss to figure out how they're going to actually get accreditation and then not lose accreditation when that audit is done, because they do random.
So just picking up on that point for a second, sorry, and looking at the planning documents, and apologies for my ignorance on this.
Point word, Chair. I mean, I had the call initially, and then I think I gave latitude for you to ask another question, but I haven't completed my initial round of questions.
That's probably right. It's a little bit hard with video conference, but I think we'll let Mr. Farlow just wrap up his final question and come back to you, Anthony.
It's not too much, Anthony, and I'm just trying to understand the site, that's all. So at the moment, in terms of what's being exhibited, the high school area, I think, is 9,240 metres square they've put out on exhibition. And then, just for my clarification, on that there is a proposed playing field, which sort of links into the future Wentworth Point Peninsula Public Park. Is that?
Okay, that's not... Okay, it's split into two stages.
Yep, so that's part of stage two, is it?
It's part of stage two when you get the 1,500 kids, and then it goes up to 1.8. Is it 1.8? 1.8. 1.8 in the second with the proposed playing field. But the proposed playing field is by agreement, a joint use agreement between education and transport are going to keep it in, according to the submissions report, the first submissions report before they put it back out with the new design. Transport are going to keep it in their ownership, so education won't have an oval. That oval is to be shared whenever it is built in stage two, and there is no date for stage two. But when it is built, it will be a shared oval between the community of 15,000 people. By then, well, at the moment, 610 primary school students and something closer to 1,000 based on current projections, and 1,500 high school students. So they're leasing it back. Okay. Yeah, but unfortunately the primary school, as a former high school teacher, the usage of that oval to meet mandatory requirements for the high school, I cannot, it takes someone a lot cleverer than me to figure out how the primary school are going to get access to it during the day if you're meeting your mandatory requirements and you've only got one oval. So it's going to be used a lot, pretty much all day, I would expect, which means that there's a problem with the primary school because there's no, the primary school is full of buildings. There's one tiny, there's the basketball court basically, that's it, in the primary school. So yes, there is an oval. It's not going to be owned by education as far as we want it to be, and we've said that in our report. We think it should be dedicated an oval for education for the two schools, and that there are some ways that you could work around that, and we've suggested that in our submission. But at this stage, we're still waiting on a reply
But
to our submission.
also, I want to add, the main sort of confusion and also anxiety for the community is that in the development application, it states that the school oval will be leased to education for only 25 years. So the community is asking me, so what happens after that?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Anthony?
Yeah, so in terms of the, I think you mentioned earlier that the planning for stage 1, I'm not sure whether you can confirm this for stage 2, has no school hall for the high school, is that right?
Want me to answer it? Thank you. The school hall is part of stage 2 as well, but again, there is no time frame for stage 2. None of that is approved. So there is a school hall planned in stage 2, and that is an actual education facility, unlike the oval, which is maintaining the ownership of transport and is jointly under a joint use agreement. So yeah, the hall doesn't come till stage 2 whenever that does occur.
And in the interim, what explanation has school infrastructure given about how they will operate without a school hall for assemblies and what's the explanation for that?
There's also been no funding as well been given for stage 2. In the latest New South Wales budget line item as well. We did raise those issues about the lack of I guess facilities for the school. But that's the reason that they gave was that that's why it's been been built in 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2, so that in stage 1, because of the small number of enrolments that they're expecting, that they do not require those sort of facilities. I can even speak on behalf of the primary school. There's actually no formal school hall at the primary school as well. So that school of 400 students, we actually cannot hold whole of school assemblies because there's only this cola area. It's got a covered outdoor learning area. It's not fit, for purpose. Even the teachers in the primary school cannot have a full staff function within the school grounds because of the lack of communal space. So from what I've heard for the stage 2 upgrade for the primary school, there's also no provision for a school hall either. So there's going to be additional learning spaces like the classrooms for the kids, but there's no provision for a school hall in the primary school.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask about traffic planning. I know you mentioned earlier the assumptions that are underpinning the additions is that the vast majority of students will arrive via active transport. It doesn't take into account staff transport. Is there going to be adequate parking for staff at the high school or the additional staff that will come with stage 2 of the primary school?
Yeah, look, that's a major issue. So even with the primary school now, there's not enough staff parking. A lot of the staff actually have to, they have some sort of, carpool process where they rotate the cars around, or they actually have to park in the local shopping centre, at a daily wage. So it is a big concern, for the high school because it seems like history is repeating itself. For a high school of about 1,500 students, you're looking at about approximately 200 staff. In order to provide these 29 car spaces, and these car spaces actually is not even in the car park of the high school. It's actually on the side street as a normal car parking space, which they said that will be designated during school hours for school staff, and then it will be free parking out of hours. The big concern that I've seen in the primary school is that the primary school principal has shared with me and the PNC that they have problems retaining talent, as a result of the lack of parking. Because obviously, if teachers have to pay for parking, then would rather, I guess, teach somewhere else where there's parking provided. And the thing is, like, I understand that, obviously, if you're in, say, Chatswood or the CBD, then obviously, not all schools would have, enough parking. But, Wentworth Point is a suburb, 15 kilometres out, of the CBD. We are not, like a central business, district area. So, I think, parking, should be, provided for its staff.
Mr. Lund, have you been consulted with...
Okay, one more, Anthony, and then we need to share around.
Sorry, I wanted to just ask further about the traffic implications. So, what modelling has been shared with the community about the transportation? Because obviously the major growth area in terms of the drawing area now is Carter Street, where there's still development being put in, whereas Wentworth near completion in terms of its maximum population. And those students coming from Carter Street will obviously have to be transported there. Probably a majority of them will be coming by car. And so has there been appropriate modelling you intimated in your submission about the difficulties in terms of access to Wentworth Point being only one road in?
Yeah.
What's going to be the impact in terms of additional cars flowing in around peak hour and in school hours into Wentworth Point?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that, because in the SSDA they actually referred to a traffic study which was done in 2014. The majority of the newer part, like the higher density part of Wentworth Point, only started 5 years ago. So these traffic studies that they were basing on, was before all the high-rise apartments have come into play. It's definitely like an inaccurate. They should be doing traffic studies now, I suppose. To I guess do proper analysis of the traffic flows in and out. Also, the other problem is that Hill Road, as you know, the only road in and out of the suburb, floods. So in the past, in a couple of years, as a result of climate change, there's been a lot of floods. We just had one, just a couple of weeks ago. There was a flood that happened, I think it was last year, where Hill Road was actually closed for 2 days. Being the only road in and out of that suburb, people were isolated, basically. So you're talking about, almost 12,000 people in the middle of Sydney being isolated because the one road gets flooded. There is a bus bridge that goes across the roads. Yeah, so that was opened up, for obviously for emergency access and during that time, but it's just unacceptable. I think for being in the in Sydney metropolitan area where you are basically stranded. If these rain events, which seems to be happening more frequently as well. They talk about 1 in 20 year, 1 in 50 year, but now it's happening twice a year even.
I think Clement alluded to it before, but also looking at the latest, the 2021 census, there's only about 10% of the students. If every student in Wentworth Point of the high school age went to the new high school, then that would make up 10% of the enrolment. So 90% of them have to come from somewhere else. And already we have buses going out to private schools from Wentworth Point, so it would be pretty unlikely that they're all going to come to the high school, but let's hope they do. But that still leaves 90% that are going to come in. Now, in the plan, we've tried to be positive in our submission and give alternatives, but there is no plan for buses. We've asked around to local schools, and based on 1,500 students and 90% of them coming from outside of Wentworth Point, then you're looking at least 9 buses every morning and every afternoon having to bring kids in and out if you want them not to come by private car. And there's no bus bay allowed in the planning. And it all seems to come back to the same thing, which is the fact that we're trying to cram too much in. There is spare Crown land, which is owned by Transport, to the east of the new high school. but transport seemed to determine from the community's perspective to slam two new massive towers on there, which would block out any future expansion or any for community use or teacher parking or whatever you want to use it for. There is space there. There is enough space. There's a block the equal size of the high school. But unfortunately, we've come up with from my perspective and from the P&C's perspective, a bad design because we're just trying to cram too much into a peninsula. So that's our position. The bus bays, we put it to them and they've come up, schools infrastructure has suggested 2 sites. One of them is on community association land, which is private land down there. No negotiations have taken place because I just happen to be one of the reps on the community association and no, they haven't contacted us. And the other one is on the other suggested bus route is about 1 kilometre away from the bus parking is a kilometre away from the school, and it falls where the PLR2 planned route is. So I don't know how you're going to put a bus bay there, because if you do, at some point you're going to have to get rid of it if the PLR2 goes ahead. So lack of planning is our concern. We've put it in our submission. We're trying to be positive and put solutions. So we're hoping someone will listen.
Wes, did you have a...
I just wanted to...
Probably got time for 2 more questions, Wes, and then Courtney.
I just wanted to find out about the consultation that you've had with the department. My understanding is that they've, I guess, provided you quite a lot of insight and also, I guess, the ability to have some feedback. Is that a reasonable view of the engagement that's happened between yourself and the department?
Yeah, so they've done 2 engagement events so far. So one was actually virtual because it was held during the COVID lockdown. And then the other one that they had was just a couple of months ago, and that was in person, so which was a lot more positive and a lot more of, so it gives the opportunity for the community to come out to actually see the plans and talk to the project managers. I think overall, there's been community engagement, I think, from the department, but I think a lot of the, I guess, feedback, was not sort of taken on board. Also, there's a lot of things that, they need to know that they don't know until they actually come onto, an event point. They have to see it in person, see the suburb in person and how it looks. I think a lot of decisions are sort of, made, sitting in a desk, I suppose, and a lot of these, especially, for the school, for example, when that school was open for 400, the government already, had designated Relocation Point as a UAP, which is a urban activation precinct, which is where they lifted the height of apartments from 8 levels to now 40. So obviously, the government knows that they'll be, injecting a lot more population into the area.
But as president, you've had direct and separate consultation. Is that correct?
You're on the PLG.
Not as the P&C, but I actually am a representative on the PLG for the high school. But again, I find the process sort of a box ticking process. I'm just there, I guess, because they need a community rep to be there. I've expressed my concerns. But I don't really see, them sort of, I guess, responding to my concerns.
Courtney?
Oh, look, I totally agree with the final comment of Mr. Lawn, just to say I've had the opportunity to drive around the local area, and it's a tiny parcel of land, but it really does highlight for you the logistical issues, but also, I'm not sure that we've really teased out the fact that those Newington, it's designed for the kids to come from Newington as well. As you say, they're clearly going to be coming along that one road, and them plus staff, as it is, it's going to be pretty congested. To add another 1,500 kids plus the staff and it's just creating a huge issue. I think the point you make, Mr. Green, about the 9 additional buses but no bus pay, it just doesn't make sense that you would, on a primary school site that's so constricted already, jam more people in and more students and more kids into that site so close when it looks like it's probably going to be needed for primary school expansion is sort of my reading of it. So, no, I just want to say thanks very much. And
We did, luckily I still have a lot of contacts in high school, so did reach out to high school senior execs to ask them how many they thought of their teachers would use active transport or some other method, because they have provided a lot of, smile because I'm a cyclist, but they've provided lots and lots of bicycle parking, which is great. Look, I think that's great, and I laud their ambition, but every senior executive that we spoke to said that almost all their staff, the nature of teaching is that there isn't a set time when you go home in the afternoon. The resources, unfortunately, you still have to carry books with you, as much as you might think, it should be all done by a tablet or something, and teachers aren't always, and the admin staff aren't always the fittest, and some of them travel massive distances to get to the school. I'm really worried. I'm trying to encourage some of my, best teachers I know to apply for this school. But I'm really worried that they're already saying to me, but how will I, get there? And if I can't park, the best teachers don't always they won't come from Wentworth Point necessarily, and they can't walk or ride. So I think particularly in a time of a teacher shortage, it's probably not the greatest sales point for a school.
Not sure we have a teacher shortage.
Well, maybe we do, or maybe we don't. But I know that won't be a sales.
That's okay.
I'm not going to enter that debate because I'm retired
That's our next
now.
inquiry.
Yeah, but I think it's certainly an issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Clement and Mark, for your presentation today, which has been excellent. Thanks for the time and consideration you've given us. And we'll be producing a report and recommendations to try and address all the issues that you and others have raised.
Thank you.
So
thanks
you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If the backbench can come forward from the Milpera campus concerns. Paul and Andrew, thank you. Yeah, if you just want to take a seat and you can swear yourself in while seated. Paul Judge and Andrew Malloy, thanks for your time today. And starting with you, Andrew, if you could just state your name, position, and take either the oath or affirmation.
Yes, my name's Andrew Malloy, and I'm taking the oath.
And your position is?
As a representative of the broader East Hills District.
Uh-huh. Right. And if you can just read out the terms of the oath.
Yep, I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. And Paul?
I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Right. If you can just say your name and position as well.
My name is Paul Judge. I'm here on behalf of the Future of Western Sydney University campus. Just by way of personal background perhaps, I am qualified in economics. I've spent 30 odd years doing the public sector trifecta, Commonwealth, state and local. And I'm a long-standing resident of Milpera. We live 2 blocks from the campus and put 2 offspring through its bachelor courses.
Thank you. You're both sworn in now, so it's available to one or both of you to make a short opening statement, please.
Sure. Well, our group sincerely appreciates the opportunity to address this committee today, Mr. Chairman, and appreciating you have a large, ambitious agenda. Our interest really lies specifically in an opportunity in our particular neck of the woods, the Western Sydney University campus at Milpera. We think this constitutes an absolutely unparalleled opportunity to address public education requirements, not only in Milpera but in the surrounding area, the catchment area of the university. The site has had a long association with education. The first primary school in the district was established there back in 1918. Since been through several iterations of a College of Advanced Education, an Institute of Advanced Education. It became a campus of what was then University of Western Sydney in the late 80s, and of course subsequently was renamed Western Sydney University Milpara campus. Most of the development of the site has taken place since the 70s. The university has invested tens of millions of dollars in the last decade or two in 40-odd purpose-built structures around the university, in education-specific infrastructure, in a raft of quality fit-out and amenities, and we can go through the detail of that if the committee wishes to go down that path. The current situation at the university, though, is really what we're here to talk about. In 2019, WSU decided to establish a new vertical campus in Bankstown CBD, which effectively meant that this Milpara campus became redundant. And in fact, the university was looking to use the return from the sale of this campus to Mirvac to bankroll its tower development in Bankstown. Those plans are proceeding. They're partway through a planning and development process as we speak. One might ask, how did we get to this point? The original site of the university was state government owned. It was gifted to one of the university's predecessors back in the 70s as the basis for a College of Advanced Education. It's been extended since then. The university's own act provides that it must seek approval from the Minister of the day before it can dispose of any part of the site that was originally received at less than commercial rates. And this was basically a nominal fee arrangement that the state government entered into back in the 70s. In 2021, the then Minister for Education, Dr. Jeff Lee, gave that approval to WSU to dispose of the site. We're not aware of any significant research that the Minister undertook at that time into the future educational requirements of the area. There was certainly no community consultation at that point in time. The sale arrangement has proceeded to the point where we're now partway through a project proposal, which is about to go on exhibition, in the face of, I might say, not only community opposition, but our own council's strong objection. Why do we see this campus as being a unique opportunity? It's an overused word, unique, but if we can perhaps distribute to the committee members some aerials of the site and a map of the layout, you'll see that it's quite a large site. It's close to 20 hectares. It's in the middle of a built-up industrial and residential area. These parcels of land just don't exist anywhere in our part of Sydney. I suspect they don't exist in too many parts of Sydney closer than the outer west. As I mentioned, over the course of the last decade or two, WSU has invested tens of millions of dollars in facilities at this site.
Paul, I'm reluctant to interrupt, but
yes.
the opening statements are normally short to allow questioning, and as chair, I'm obliged to ensure that proceedings here are relevant to our terms of reference. We're not an inquiry into WSU or tertiary education, nor are we an inquiry into urban planning and housing density issues. I see in your handout you do have some data about our remit, which is school enrolments, and
Indeed.
We're looking at school infrastructure, so I think that's where the comments and the questions will need to head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pass in that case to Andrew, who's across the demographic and enrolment data.
Yes, yes, I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. I have a Master of Business Administration, a Master of Arts and a Bachelor of Arts and Graduate Diploma of Education, covering 3 disciplines of humanities, education, business and economics. In 2018, besides teaching at TAFE for 9 years, I returned to my old high school, where I discovered many things about modern education, being the teacher shortage, financials, but the most important thing was to look at the school infrastructure and the way that students' opportunities are being restricted by serious lack of buildings and the need for funds to be utilised in this area. I'll just draw, just for reference point, my own submission 71, number 71 has a number of those issues that you can read at a later date in time. Okay, so the population of Milperra and its surrounding suburbs are growing substantially over the years. Attachment number E shows the population increase of Milperra is forecast to grow from between 2016 and 2013, 36 by 12%, and the majority of the population growth will be in babies, preschoolers, primary schoolers, and secondary schoolers. There's only one public school in Milperra Public School, which was relocated from this particular site in 1975. There are no public high schools in Milperra. However, there are some educational high schools in the adjoining suburbs of East Hills and Picnic Point, which are available for the people of Milperra. Between 2014 and 19, the population of Milperra Public School itself grew by 14.6%. However, in the other documents on the website for this committee, Councillor Linda Downey from Canterbury Bankstown Council received a reply on the 20th of June 2022 in which the Milperra Public School enrolments from 2016 were at 232, but in 2022 they're at 304. This is an increase of 31% in the students. Now, since those statistics were delivered to the committee in the past couple of weeks, there's been a MOVAC development approved in the western side of Milperra for 180 new dwellings, new building sites, of which it's unspecified how many of those may be duplexes. So if the school population's already grown from 31% in 6 years and you've got another 180 dwellings on the western side, and the proposer of this development is proposing 430 dwellings, that's an increase of 630 dwellings on top of the 31% growth already. Now, Milperra itself has only got 1,300 dwellings, so an increase of 630 houses is something like 48% increase. All across the East Hills district, in the adjoining suburbs of Panania, Picnic Point and Reesby, you couldn't walk down a street now without a single block being developed as a duplex in any of the streets that I take you down. The population is set to grow within the greater southern Bankstown district by something of 12 to 15,000 people over the next 20 years. But at present, Picnic Point High School has 1,000 students and is pretty much at cap. East Hills Girls is at 850 students and is pretty much at cap. East Hills Boys has a similar a number. St Joseph Banks is at 800 students and within 2 years is forecast to be at 1,000 students. So in a mathematics sense, if we've got 180 new dwellings on the western side of Milperra, we've got 430 dwellings if this goes ahead, and we've already got duplexes galore happening in Panania, Picnic Point, Reesby. Where are all these high school students going to go if the schools are already over cap? And I must add that in a personal anecdotal evidence is that last year my son had to relocate high schools, and when we rang up Menai High School across the Georges River, we were told Menai were 17% over cap. So what does any department do if they want to just adjust the numbers? All the students from Year 7 2022 from south of the railway line between Riverwood and Reesby, between Little Saltpan Creek and Saltpan Creek, they're all going over to Menai High School, which was already 17% over cap. So we've got 100 to 150 students every single year for 6 years inclusive, 600 to 900 students that suddenly don't belong in the broader East Hills district for purposes of organising catchment numbers. We'll stick them over the river. When we stick them over the river, we can say, yep, no, there's no need for a new high school at Milperra because those people have gone over to Menai, waiting 2 weeks for a science laboratory to do experiments. And the last point I'll add is that we've been waiting 2 terms for the Minister for Transport, David Elliott, and the local member, Wendy Lindsay, to organise a school bus for those students. Some of them are crossing Henry Lawson Drive and Davies Road. This kind of infrastructure, schools are supposed to be about equity and safety to students. 2 terms, 12 and 13-year-olds that have been shuffled across the river for purposes of adjusting numbers so we don't need the Milperra site. They haven't got a bus organised yet. Even letters by David Coleman, the member for Banks, have not. They refused to answer him.
Okay.
So
thanks,
that's
Andrew.
all. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Anthony Diadam had a particular interest here, so we'll start the questioning with Anthony, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew and Paul, for your attendance today. I suppose in terms of the kind of core focus of this inquiry, I might summarise the issue. We've heard earlier today around Wentworth Point the fact that the department are trying to cram a school on a very small site. We know that the Department of Education needs to do long-term planning around need. We know that the Canterbury Bankstown area is a fast-growing area, and we've got this parcel of land that has since 1918 been dedicated towards an educational purpose, and now at the whim of the Minister, that purpose is no longer going to be applied to this land. I suppose my question really is, to what extent was there any consultation around this decision? And when was the community advised that this proposal around changing the use of this land and foregoing this opportunity to retain this land for an educational purpose, ideally for a public high school? When did the community get wind that this decision was being made?
Well, I think it'd be accurate to say around 2019, the university started making known its plans to find an alternative use for the Milperra campus site. As far as the minister's decision to actually provide the approval for the university to proceed with that disposal, there was just no advertised consultation at all. It was at a peak period of COVID, as we would all recall, 2021. It was basically very much a decision that the minister steamrolled through. I'm not even aware that our local state member had much to do with that decision, but it was simply announced.
Yes,
And what advice, has there been any communication from school infrastructure to explain that to justify presumably they provided some advice to the minister in making that decision that the land wasn't going to be required in the long term for an educational purpose?
One might hope so.
Yes, I have a couple of more pieces. At a council meeting last year when Mirvac addressed Canterbury Bankstown Council, it was stated by one of the representatives that Wendy Lindsay had met with Mirvac on the 20th of May and had given them an indication that she'd undertaken community consultation. However, it is my solemn belief that there's been no adequate community consultation whatsoever, asking the community what we would really want, let alone looking at specific numbers. And to answer the new question, what's the new question? Got it?
I find that people say they don't have community consultation when they they don't feel like that the decision goes their way. That's usually what I've determined. Well, no, it is because I'm going to a question.
Yes, I just wanted to answer Anthony's question.
Oh, okay. Well,
Come to Anthony's point, please, Andrew. But Andrew, I've got to bring you back to the fact that it's an inquiry about school infrastructure, not housing densities or the future of the university.
I've got a number of questions, and we've just
Yes.
So,
I'll answer Anthony's question. On Wendy's own page last year, I asked what's happening with the Milpera site, and there's a reply which simply says the department didn't want it. So, are we going to assign over 100 years of history because the department don't want it? If there's been no consultation with these people.
Can I check? So that site was actually given to Western Sydney University in 1997, is that correct?
No, it was back in the 70s.
Okay.
It was the old CAE.
Correct.
When the Dawkins, 70s would have been the Dawkins reforms in the 80s.
Correct, yes.
But the actual transfer of the land occurred in 1997 under Labor, is that correct? Well, I can tell you it is. The land was actually transferred to Western Sydney University under Labor in 1997.
As part of the renaming of the university.
It was Minister Stokes who was asked to sign off on the transfer in 2018. Part of the approval process was that the Catholic school that was adjoining the land was given the opportunity to purchase some of the land first, which is they have done. And then it was signed off by Minister Lee after that for the reassignment. So I think
And just to add to that, I take it as well that part of it is that Western Sydney University is redeveloping a Bankstown campus in the Bankstown CBD.
Yes, as I mentioned.
And so,
the evidence, where, sorry, you're actually asking a question.
well, I'm just asking if they're aware of this, and does that change perhaps the views around the land, the use of the land?
No, not at all.
Catholic school, given the Catholic schools have been able to purchase part of the land,
A Catholic school, not a public institution, I'd hasten to say.
Does it matter?
Well, order. Look, can we come back to school infrastructure? I think where's the point you're making? It's fair to say neither side of politics has ever stood in the way of the redevelopment plans of the University of Western Sydney. No state government of either complexion has ever said, university, you don't know what you're doing, we're going to make the decision for you.
It's very much the university's decision, Mr. Chairman, to make that choice.
That's right. But I come back to the point that's outside our remit. We're not going to make a recommendation that the university got this wrong and revisit the decision.
I wouldn't ask you to do that, Mr.
We're solely here about schools.
And we transferred the land in 1997. It's not our
point. In terms of schools, high schools and primary schools and preschools, is that we have a site here with all the necessary infrastructure that would accommodate a integrated co-educational high school from preschool through primary to secondary in a purpose-built facility that has literally everything that
this is on land owned by the university.
Yeah. The Labor Party transferred in 1997 to the university.
A token amount back in the mid-70s.
Okay, we've got the history of it. We need further questions, please. We've got 6 minutes left of our hearing time. Questions,
I've got no more questions.
No more questions. Anthony?
I just wanted to come down to this question around selective schools. There's been, an announcement around a selective school for southwestern Sydney. Is this a site that could potentially accommodate a new selective school?
Well, we believe so, Mr. Adam. Sydney has 48 selective high schools. Canterbury Bankstown LGA, the largest LGA in Sydney with 400,000 people, has exactly none. None within its LGA. This is the opportunity that we're asking this committee to form a view on and perhaps make a recommendation to government on, that there is the opportunity here at the Milpera campus, before it's raised to the ground for housing, to set it up as a selective high school. It may not even need the entire site. There are parts of the site that are extensive car parks or areas that may have already been disposed of to the adjacent Catholic school. This was a facility that used to accommodate 8,000 students, so it's a large area. We believe that there's facilities there that could be very readily switched across to deliver on the potential for a selective high school.
You spoke about that.
No, Wes, you said you'd finished your question.
All right. Yeah, no, fair enough. All
You're
right.
jumping in. Anthony,
All right. Fair call.
Anthony, further questions?
Oh, sorry, I thought Mr. Malloy was just about to say something.
I know I'm right. For once, I'm lost for words.
Lost for words, okay. Anthony?
No, look, I might leave it there. That's
Okay. Any final closing comments then from the witnesses?
Did you want to touch
Yes,
on?
I'd just like to say that we've got the current schools, the 4 high schools are over cap or near cap. We're going to increase the population by 20 or 30% in the southern Bankstown over the next 20 years. And I can't believe that the New South Wales government wouldn't say, well, let's at least have a second look at this site and say, let's see how we could redevelop this as an extra high school for all these extra people, particularly Milperra itself is having a large amount of development. And it's going to be an opportunity to go to waste. And one thing I'd just like to table, I just remembered before, there's already a petition with 1,500 people, greater than 1,500, that Liz was going to circulate. Is Liz around? Sorry.
It's in the bundle.
And that's growing by the day. And, the people that are moving in the area, in another 10 years' time, every second development's like a preschool. In 10 years' time, we're already over cap and cramped into the schools. It's going to be a sorry day in 10 years' time when those people are getting further crammed into the existing high schools.
Move to Wagga. We've got land.
And if I could offer my final thought, Mr. Chairman, while housing's important, there are alternatives to meet the housing targets that the state government has set for the LGA. There are no alternatives for new sites for primary or high schools in our area or anywhere near our area other than this one. This is an irreplaceable opportunity. Once it's built out, it's built out. I think we all appreciate that there are no opportunities to readily establish new facilities in well-established, built-out areas anywhere near the centre of the city.
Just on that point, though, the alternatives for the housing is that this looks to me like a low-rise residential development. The alternatives would be higher density, wouldn't they, around the area?
We expect that most of these dwellings would be 2-storey. There's scope also for 3-storey residences as part of the NERVAC plan. But the council, with community consultation, has draft LEPs for a number of sites around railway stations in the LGA, which would accommodate 8, 10-storey apartment-type dwellings that could readily meet the housing targets that the government has in mind. What we're saying here is that there is one opportunity to get this right for our area, and it's on this site. We can find through densification, through changes to zonings close to railway stations, other alternatives for other housing needs.
Yes, and I'll just finish with this. At those 4 other high schools, there's demountables after demountables after demountables. At the Menai High School, where those students have been shuffled, there's up to 10 demountables, and no bus, I may add. And so it's not like a great job's being done at the moment catering for the infrastructure for those existing schools. And yet we've got tens of millions of dollars of buildings, which, because somebody in the department said they don't want it, and there was this consultation, goodbye. That's the end of that site. And so it's really a sad story to think that that can't be reused. NERVAC can't be asked to perhaps rebuild or redesign and perhaps build 2 or 3 6 or 7-storey towers towards the southern end of the campus and leave those buildings intact when you can only provide old demountables for the current students in the district. I find it hard to swallow buildings being pulled down because that's not providing infrastructure, and shuffling people over a river and not giving them a bus is not providing a movable infrastructure.
We'd very much, Mr. Chair, like to invite the committee to undertake a site visit at their convenience. For want of a physical visit, there is a virtual tour of the campus facilities that are available through some links we've shared with the team here. So if they could be distributed to the committee, that would be useful as well.
Thank you. Okay.
But there's no substitute for coming out and having a look.
If the leadership was there, it could be compromised. They could get their 430 new dwellings at a different part of the campus, leaving the buildings intact. Yep.
Well, thanks for that. We're out of time, but thanks for your presentation and consideration for the committee today. And we need to now go to some motions in private session.
So that's fine.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Cheers.
Thank you for your attendance.